Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Carolyn Watson. If kidnapping is not about satisfying the criminal's painful desires, then most often, the attackers seek money. But it is not always that simple. Some frightening actions have a much more mundane nature. Budgery, in Australia, does not seem like a place where something terrifying could happen. It is a rural and remote area with a population of fewer than 200 people. Located in the peaceful region of Victoria, it is not even marked on all maps. The local community consists of only a few dozen families, and everyone knows each other well. However, this calm and measured pace did not prevent criminal stories from surfacing. The media began to write about the quiet and prosperous life in Budgery, which changed in 2008 due to an event that made the entire continent shudder. A man named Julian Buchwald, 25, lived there. His family owns a large piece of land in the area. Julian had a girlfriend, 17-year-old Carolyn Watson, who lived in a neighboring town. They had been dating for about 2 years. Even in his younger years, Julian loved to explore the surroundings, especially his plot of land, to satisfy his natural curiosity. The difficult terrain, combined with the abundance of vegetation, offered plenty of opportunities for imagination and exploration. Both Julian and Carolyn continued to live with their parents. Despite dating for 2 years, they were very serious about their relationship. They often discussed the prospects of marriage. Being deeply religious individuals, just like their families, they even visited the local pastor of the church to declare their desire to marry during a Sunday service, where they had first met. Faith played a significant role in their lives. On the morning of March 4, 2008, Julian picked up Carolyn from her home for a picnic. She lived in the neighboring town of Churchill, which was a bit larger, with about 5,000 people. It was located about 20 minutes away by car from Budgery. After leaving, they returned to Julian's house because he had forgotten some food in the car that could spoil in the heat. They gathered everything they needed and quickly left before it got too hot. Typically, Julian and Carolyn would relax on Julian's family property, where there were plenty of secluded spots that looked picturesque for a romantic outing. However, this time, they decided to venture further to visit a nearby waterfall. Around 3 p.m., they planned to return. Most of the journey went smoothly, but just before reaching the waterfall, Julian suddenly became alarmed. He noticed the carcass of an animal on the side of the road, so he slowed down and stopped at a safe distance around a small bend. He told Carolyn that he wanted to get out to check, as he thought the animal might still be alive and he could help it. This curiosity wasn't unusual for him. Carolyn had gotten used to these quirks and decided to wait for him inside the SUV while following his movements in the rearview mirror. At some point, Carolyn became distracted. When she looked back again, she no longer saw Julian. She assumed he had gone behind the hill or a turn, which is why she was out of view. But after some time, Julian still hadn't returned, and this began to worry her. He always came back quickly. Realizing they were far from the city and in the wilderness, Carolyn was afraid to get out of the car. Her boyfriend's absence increasingly troubled her. Suddenly, she caught sight of something even more frightening in the mirror. A figure darted into view. She saw a man standing next to the car. He looked threatening, fully dressed with gloves, and wearing a balaclava. Carolyn intended to lock the doors of the car, but the stranger had already jumped to her side, opened the door. Before she could react, pulled her out of the car and threw her to the ground. He covered her mouth with tape, silencing her screams, and she could barely resist. Within minutes, the kidnapper had bound and blindfolded her, then shoved her into the trunk of his car. Terrified, Carolyn hoped that Julian would return to save her. However, the kidnapper got behind the wheel and drove away, leaving her alone with her fear. She tried to escape, but the ropes were too tight to loosen. It felt like the trip lasted several hours. Eventually, the SUV came to a stop. The trunk opened. The kidnapper, still wearing a balaclava and gloves, stood in front of her again. He threw her onto the ground, and Carolyn realized she was still unable to free herself from her bindings. Despite her desperate attempts to do so, she had little idea of where she was located, but she saw that there was a dense forest surrounding her. The stranger tore off her clothes, using a knife to cut away her underwear, and then walked away. Carolyn was completely naked, lying next to the car. She heard a sound as if the kidnapper was digging. This noise came from a few meters away. Carolyn realized that she was about to die. She could not imagine what awaited her, but she understood that she would not get out of here alive. The only thing she could do in such a situation was to pray. At that time, Julian's mother and father noticed their absence and that both had left by car. Julian and Carolyn told their parents that they were going on a picnic together but did not specify the location. They were expected to return around 3 p.m., but the clock now read around 5 p.m. While everything could be attributed to youth and passion, Julian and Carolyn was always very responsible, was never late, especially for an extended period. Julian's mother called her son, but he didn't answer. Carolyn also ignored the calls. This was uncharacteristic for them, as they always stayed in touch. A delay of several hours seemed unthinkable, considering that they had not warned anyone that they would be late. The parents inspected the area around the house but found no traces of Julian and Carolyn. A search operation alone on such a large piece of land seemed pointless, so Julian's mother decided to return to the house and wait for them in the driveway. Suddenly, she discovered something strange. She saw a glint as from glass and found a bottle with a note inside that was stuck in the fence mesh. She read it, and its contents horrified her. Some criminal had written that he had kidnapped Julian and Carolyn. The text was full of obscene language. The criminal warned the parents not to report it to the police, otherwise, Carolyn would be burned alive, and Julian would die in agony. The kidnapper spoke of some business he had to attend to, stating that if he succeeded, the children would return home safe and sound, but only if the parents complied with all his demands. This message horrified she. Though she panicked, she was not going to follow the demands of the criminal and reported the matter to the police. Law enforcement officers immediately responded to the call and began to inspect the area, which was rugged terrain with a lot of vegetation. There was much work to be done. Relatives hoped that Julian and Carolyn had secluded themselves in the area since they rarely left Butchery. The family's situation worsened when Julian's relatives found out that both Julian's and Carolyn's families had received ominous notes. The families of Julian and Carolyn and the detectives met to discuss what had happened. Carolyn's father found a similar bottle on the porch of their house, which contained a message insisting that they not contact the police, also threatening to kill Julian and Carolyn. Even worse, he promised to deal with the entire family if his demands were violated. Everyone wondered what could possibly have motivated the hatred toward this sweet couple of young people. Initially, it was believed that that were just a cruel joke. Now the police had two notes, as well as the real disappearance of Julian and Carolyn. Until late in the evening, neither Julian nor Carolyn had made contact. The handwriting in both letters was identical. That means that the two families may have a common enemy. However, no one had the slightest idea who he might be. It was curious that the note contained a symbol that seemed to have an occult nature. Some group that considered Christians their enemies. This was considered a valuable clue, and it was quickly discovered that it was used by a certain satanic cult called the Order of Nine Angles. The history of this organization was checked and found that it had appeared in Great Britain back in the 60s, was actively luring in members in the 70s. However, the cult did not become widespread and did not have a large number of followers. Some of its members were being held accountable for extremist ideology and various threats. As the activists gained notoriety, the group opened branches in several countries around the world. Their ideology included isolating their members from the rest of society. They openly advocated for violence and committing crimes against perceived enemies, specifically targeting Christians whom they recognized as opponents to be destroyed. The most frightening aspect of this movement's activities was the propaganda promoting human sacrifices, which horrified families and prompted the police to intensify their efforts. Julian and Carolyn were simply devout Christians. Interestingly, until that point, the activities of this group had only been observed in Australia. They could potentially attempt to declare themselves by committing their first ritual murder. Satanists might use the sacrifice of Julian and Carolyn to gain fame from there began to gather like-minded people. The relatives did not receive any news for several days. Julian's car was declared wanted, but that didn't help. All the detectives' efforts proved in vain as they couldn't find either Julian and Carolyn or any leads on where to continue searching. Considering who Carolyn and Julian may have contacted, it was believed that it would be impossible to return they alive. The relatives knew that they had packed only a small amount of food meant to last a few hours. They had no worn clothes and no equipment. They did not have tents to survive the temperature fluctuations that occur in Australia during the day and night. There were also concerns about dangerous areas where Julian and Carolyn could fall victim to predators. The scorching heat and hunger posed significant threats. Even if they escaped from their kidnappers, encounters with wild or poisonous animals could be deadly. The rescue operation transitioned to a recovery effort, but this, too, yielded no results. 6 days passed during which the families of Julian and Carolyn did not find any peace. Suddenly, a message arrived: Julian and Carolyn had been found. What was most astonishing was that both were relatively safe. They had simply emerged onto the roadway near the Alpine National Park. A passing farmer stopped to help and immediately reported their situation to the police. It was not surprising that law enforcement officers were unable to find any trace of the individuals Julian and Carolyn. The national park was several hundred kilometers from where they lived, requiring about a 6-hour drive by car. Julian sustained serious injuries. While making their way through the desert, he suffered sunburn, cuts from thorny bushes, blisters, and bruises all over his body. Nonetheless, aside from the extreme stress of their ordeal, they were otherwise fine. Detectives met with Julian and Carolyn to gather information and prevent potentially dangerous criminals from operating in the area. They first communicated with Carolyn, who detailed the horrific trials she endured after being kidnapped. She described being undressed, thrown to the ground, where she lay and prayed just a few meters away from her kidnapper, who was digging in the earth. She was certain that this was her grave. This agonizing wait continued interminably until the sounds of digging stopped. Carolyn heard footsteps moving away, and everything went silent. Realizing that the criminal had abandoned her, she knew she could not remain passive. Quickly, she attempted to free herself from her ropes, but they did not yield. Her hands hurt as she rubbed them until they bled. Suddenly, she heard Julian's voice calling her name as he crawled closer. He managed to rip off her blindfold and the duct tape from her mouth. Julian, also tied up and without clothes, had managed to free his hands. This allowed Julian to finally escape and then free Carolyn. However, the danger was not over. The kidnapper could return at any moment. There was no car, but the abandoned backpack and scattered contents of the trunk remained. They found supplies that they had taken with them for a picnic, gathered everything, and fled into the thicket. They wanted to get as far away from that place as possible to plan their next steps. Along the way, Julian recounted his story. He approached an animal lying on the side of the road to examine the body, but as he leaned over, he heard footsteps approaching quickly from behind. He didn't have time to react before he was attacked. He was struck on the back of the head hard enough to lose consciousness. According to Julian, when he awoke a few hours later, he immediately began calling out for Carolyn. The criminal was no longer nearby, having escaped in an SUV. Over the next few days, they desperately tried to reach the road, making their way through thick bushes. They risked encountering wild animals. Even the slightest bite from an Australian poisonous spider or snake could be fatal. Their supplies were very limited since they had packed only a small amount of food for their picnic, specifically. During the day, Julian and Carolyn suffered from the suffocating heat, risking sunstroke. At night, they struggled to stay warm, sharing a single sleeping bag. The situation was compounded by the fear that the kidnapper could pursue them and find them at any moment. Both Julian and Carolyn were completely unaware of why this had happened to them. The situation worsened when, a few days later, they unwittingly returned to the same place where they had been held hostage. As it turned out, they had made a large circle. Nevertheless, Julian took advantage of the situation. Despite his fear of being caught, he was able to steal clothes and any remaining food, improving the dire condition of the starving couple. However, everything came to an end quickly. Carolyn fell into despair, feeling that they could not be saved. and found solace only in prayer. Finally, God heard her pleas. After 6 days, they were able to find their way out of the dense bushes. They emerged onto the road, where the police spoke to Julian, for the most part, confirmed his girlfriend's account, except for the part where he claimed to be unconscious. Julian and Carolyn was sent to stay in the hospital and then with their relatives, but law enforcement officers had no time to rest. Despite the miraculous rescue of the kidnapping victims, the armed forces still faced a real threat that the dangerous organization responsible for the kidnapping would continue its destructive activities. It had to be stopped at any cost. Before bloodshed could begin, the police decided to go to the place from which the prisoners had escaped. They found cut pieces of duct tape, clothing, a shovel, and other items, all of which were checked. To the detectives' amazement, some items belonged to Julian, including a rope found in his house's barn. There was also disturbed earth that had been dug up. The detectives discovered a balaclava, black clothing, gloves, and other things described by Carolyn. From that moment, Julian's story became even more disturbing. In particular, Julian was never able to show any signs of the head injuries he claimed to have sustained. Any such injuries should have remained visible, especially if Julian had indeed delivered a blow that could have knocked him out for several hours. They decided to talk to Julian again. From the start, the detectives made it clear that they had good reason to suspect him of kidnapping. Julian was nervous but insisted on his story, referring to his beloved, who confirmed much of what he said. However, within a few hours, he was brought to justice. Julian admitted that he had organized the kidnapping himself. He had bought the items he intended to use for the kidnapping in advance, taking some from home, including items that allowed him to hide his face from Carolyn. He had even trained for some time to tie knots that would not injure when immobilizing someone. The cult symbols used in the letters were meant to scare his parents and Carolyn's relatives into not contacting the police, preventing detective intervention. Julian deliberately used foul language in the letters he sent to the Buchwald and Watson families. No one thought he would say such words. Julian had deliberately chosen the longest route to the waterfall to avoid detection and confuse the tracks. The guy kept a lookout for anything suspicious that could attract attention and give him the opportunity to implement his plan. He eventually noticed an animal carcass on the side of the road and decided it was time to act. Julian stopped around a corner to hide from Carolyn's sight, changed his clothes, and returned to the car to play out the rest. The place he had chosen to take Carolyn was far away, allowing them to stay away from people. According to him, when Carolyn heard sounds of earth being dug up, he was actually not making a grave but getting rid of evidence. After that, he got into the car and drove away to hide it in the woods, then he returned to Carolyn. Along the way, he got rid of his clothes and wrapped ropes around his hands to make himself look like a kidnapped person. After that, he began to call her name in a weak voice, pretending that he had just regained consciousness after a blow to the head. The kidnapping was carefully planned. He had items that helped they survive this difficult period. Even the fact that they returned to the place from which they had escaped was part of the plan. However, one aspect still remained unclear. Why stage such a spectacle? 22-year-old Julian admitted that he wanted to marry Carolyn immediately. They had already been dating for 2 years, but she did not agree. 17-year-old Carolyn planned to finish school, decide on her future, go to college, get a job, become independent before finally tying the knot and starting a family. At the same time, both were devout Christians who believed in abstaining from intimate before marriage. He did not want to wait so long. He desperately wanted to satisfy his intimate desires, so he staged the kidnapping. He specifically planned everything so that they would both be isolated during their wandering through the dense thickets. Julian tried various tactics to persuade his girlfriend to be intimate. He reasoned that they might not survive this adventure, and it was worth trying intimate. He also convinced Carolyn that in the face of death, they had entered into an alliance in the fight for their lives, which he equated with marriage. Julian even tried to persuade her that they needed to engage in intimate intercourse to keep warm at night, claiming he had read about such a method somewhere. Carolyn was unwavering, continued to refuse, and insisted on her beliefs, convinced that God would save them. Therefore, his plan ultimately failed. Among the items Julian had prepared for the trip, there was a map of the national park. They had not actually gotten lost when Julian realized Carolyn was not going to give up. Therefore, he decided to lead them out of this national park. After Julian's confession, he was slapped by Carolyn, charged with kidnapping and perjury. The trial was scheduled for August 2009. Julian was not held in jail after the trial because his wealthy family posted bail. Julian took advantage of the situation and made another attempt to escape punishment. In September 2009, he obtained an Indian passport, boarded a plane, and flew to China. The document was obviously fake but of sufficient quality to fool Australian security services. Julian dyed his hair black and spent a long time sunbathing to darken his skin as much as possible, even though he was fair-skinned and required many tanning sessions. Although he managed to fly out of Australia, the Indian security services were more vigilant and refused to let him enter the country. Julian was arrested in Singapore. It was assumed that India was only the first stop on his journey and that Germany was intended to be his final destination. After that, he received a sentence of 7 years and 3 months for kidnapping, as well as an additional 6 months for escaping. He tried to challenge the court's decision, arguing that it was too harsh, but could not contest the fact that the kidnapping in this incident was a significant issue. In another unexpected turn of events, it was revealed that Julian was originally from Germany. His family had moved to Australia at an early age. In 2014, the Immigration Service considered the possibility of canceling his visa. Julian tried to resist this decision but failed. In 2016, he was deported to Germany, ending up in a country where he did not know the language at all. There were no relatives or acquaintances with whom he could start anew. His further fate is not reliably known, and there is no information about whether he went to prison. According to some sources, Julian's situation has worsened. On the other hand, Carolyn could not come to her senses for a long time after such a betrayal. It was difficult for her to learn to trust people, especially men. What happened in her life afterward is unknown. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Megan Carr and Cherish DeSantis. In 1992, in the small town of Thomasville, Georgia, USA, best friends Megan Carr and Cherish DeSantis were studying together. Both were born in 1975, just one day apart. They considered it a real providence that determined they would be best friends since childhood. Both lived with their families in this quiet, calm town. They came from wealthy families. Megan's father owned a well drilling company that had been in the family since the 1940s. Megan's parents were divorced, so she lived with her mother, Shirley. Cherish's father, Peter, was involved in the tobacco industry and owned a tobacco business that had been running for 2 decades. Cherish and Megan met in elementary school, where they became very close friends and spent their free time together. They had a lot in common, and their families had similar income levels. At 16, Cherish was in a relationship with a boy. They had been close friends since elementary school and were part of a privileged group of teenagers who owned their own cars. This made them popular at school. Megan's mother raised her daughter alone and was a bit stricter. Megan was very creative, performing with her group in the school orchestra and choreographing productions. Overall, they were typical teenagers who loved to have fun, attend parties, and confide in each other. In spring, they looked forward to the upcoming holidays. The last day of classes was March 26, 1992. The teachers were preparing for spring break, which would last until April 6. Since Thomasville was close to the Florida border, it was the perfect opportunity for teenagers to drive to the coast for sunbathing and swimming. On March 27, 1992, the girls planned to visit their favorite beach on the Alligator Point Peninsula on the Gulf Coast, a little-known area that was always quiet and peaceful. They intended to leave around noon and return home later that evening. The previous Thursday, Megan and Cherish had spent the night at Cherish's boyfriend's place, Alex, preparing beach bags for the trip. On Friday morning, they left around 10 a.m. A few friends were supposed to join them, but at the last moment, they all declined, so the two friends set out alone. Along the way, they made 3 stops, first at a store to buy food, then at a Florida souvenir shop, and finally, they had a snack at a diner. Around noon, they arrived at the beach, parked, and enjoyed the music while swimming and chatting. Everything seemed perfectly fine. A local policeman and his wife were walking along the beach on his day off. Noticing the girls, they decided not to disturb them and moved to a distance out of their sight. However, the policeman's wife noticed that the girls appeared to be lying on top of each other, which seemed strange, but they did not intervene immediately. Some time later, as the couple was preparing to leave, they passed by the rocky ledge and noticed the girls still hadn't moved at all. Concerned, the experienced policeman took a closer look and realized that something unusual. He instructed his wife to stay put while he went to check on them. When he approached, he saw that the girls were not displaying any signs of life. Their bodies were covered in blood, as were the things around them. Since they didn't have cell phones at that time, the policeman rushed to the nearest phone to inform the county sheriff about the incident. At about 3 p.m., the dispatcher received the call. The incident shocked law enforcement and residents alike, as nothing like this had happened in the area since 1966. The crime rate was almost zero. When the police arrived at the secluded beach, they confirmed the presence of the bodies of the two girls. All their belongings, including wallets with cash and identification cards, were intact, ruling out robbery. The music was still playing in the car, and the keys were lying next to the bodies. It was a chilling scene. The girls' swimsuits had not been removed or torn, making abuse assault unlikely. Megan had a towel soaked in blood on her head, and both girls had 2 gunshot wounds to the head, indicating that the attack was unexpected, as there were no signs of struggle on the beach. Authorities began searching for anyone who might have witnessed the attack or heard gunshots. However, an inspection of the surrounding area didn't yield any new leads until their communication with local detectives revealed a young man who frequented the beach. He mentioned that around 12:30 that same day, he heard a noise resembling fireworks. It was likely that these were gunshots. After that, he saw a car leaving the beach that was unfamiliar to him. Presumably, it was a blue Plymouth Volare. Right away, they found strangers in the parking lot near Megan's car. It did not resemble the one described by the witness. A girl was still playing music, and behind the car, there was a guy who was looking through something on his camera. The detectives decided that this guy could be connected to the tragedy and considered the possibility that the witness had incorrectly identified the make of the car, as the color matched. They approached him, and he introduced himself as a local photographer, stating that he had spent the whole day on the beach taking pictures of wildlife. He claimed that he must have known something about the teenagers since he had been nearby, but surprisingly, he said he didn't see or hear anything suspicious. This seemed odd, so one of the police officers decided to check him using one of their usual tactics. This random motorist was the only suspect at that moment. The detective ironically suggested that the guy could have been filming not only birds but also girls who had come to relax on the beach. In response, the guy took an aggressive defensive position, which looked even more suspicious. This gave the detectives grounds to search the guy's car. When they searched the glove compartment of his car, they found a gun. By evening, the young man tried to negotiate with the police to let him go, insisting that he had done nothing wrong and did not understand what they wanted from him. However, the suspect was detained and taken to the police station. Meanwhile, Megan and Cherish's parents had not yet learned of what had happened. They were very worried about their daughters. Around 6 p.m., Megan's mother could not stand it any longer and decided to go to Cherish's house to check on her daughter, but the girls were not there. Both families were worried, as their daughters had not returned and were not aware that authorities were preparing to inform them about the tragic incident at the beach. Naturally, this was devastating for both the Carr family and the DeSantis family. The parents tried to assist the police in any way possible, mentioning that Megan and Cherish spent most of their time together, had no other teenagers in their company. They maintained constant contact with a couple of girls and a guy named Alex. However, she immediately emphasized that the young man did not seem like an aggressor capable of violence and refused to believe it. Detectives were convinced that the assailant knew the victims and was likely following them. They struggled to understand how a stranger with a weapon could get so close to Megan and Cherish without arousing their suspicions. Megan and Cherish had to remain vigilant, as the killer managed to get close enough to attack both girls almost instantly. Thus, detectives carefully checked and analyzed the immediate circle of the victims. Meanwhile, the detained photographer was interrogated at the police station. He admitted to having seen the girls on the beach but insisted they were alive when he passed by, photographing the scenery. His apparent disinterest in them only increased suspicions against him. The police offered him a polygraph test, which he agreed to, and he passed easily. Additionally, the gun found in the glove compartment did not match the murder weapon. It seemed he was telling the truth, and he was subsequently released. According to the medical examiner's conclusions, both teenagers were attacked in the head at very close range with an 8-gauge weapon, and no other signs of injury or assault were found. Consequently, the motive for the crime remained unclear. The very next morning, news of the double murder on a secluded Florida beach was broadcast across all media channels in both Florida and Georgia. Authorities called on any witnesses who might have seen something to contact them. Among those who reached out was a woman who had moved to Gator Point 2 weeks prior. She spoke negatively about the area, deeming it unsafe. Upon learning that 2 girls went there alone without any escorts or dogs, she labeled them as too frivolous. She claimed there were several witnesses who saw the schoolgirls that morning and afternoon, but no one witnessed the moment of the attack or saw the suspects or the victims lying bloody on each other until a police officer and his wife were walking along the beach. Detectives then became interested in a man, the owner of a small cafe located just a couple of hundred meters from the shore. Megan and Cherish could have stopped by the cafe while heading to the parking lot. According to the police, he should have known and heard the moment of the attack. However, the man denied this, stating that he and his employees were busy with repairs in the bar that day. The noise from tools and hammers being used drowned out any gunshots. The high school girls had chosen a peculiar location to spend their time, as it was one of the most isolated areas along the coast, according to him. They could have learned about this secluded place from someone else, or perhaps they had been here many times themselves and sought out secluded spots. This section of the beach was exclusively visited by locals, and this detail could have become an important clue in the search for the criminal. The bartender said he remembered something unusual. Sometime after noon on the day of the murder, a man had entered and asked for a Bloody Mary. The problem was that renovations were taking place, and it took longer than usual to prepare the drink. The bartender apologized for the inconvenience and offered a drink on the house, but the stranger insisted that the owner take his money, stating it was his first and last time there. The next suspicious character was Alex. It was with him that Megan and Cherish had spent the night before the trip. After relaxing on the beach, they planned to visit him again. There was an assumption that he had gone to the beach with Megan and Cherish and could have harmed them there. This information should have been checked right from the beginning of the police investigation. He appeared heartbroken. He simply could not believe that her girlfriend and best friend had died. They communicated regularly and a lot. He denied any suspicion of involvement in the crime but mentioned something unusual. He stated that he did not own a gun. However, the police had not yet disclosed that Megan and Cherish were shot dead. Although he could have seen this information on television or heard it from someone else. He provided his alibi, which was confirmed by his employer. He was working on the day of the trip. Consequently, he was quickly ruled out as a suspect. The families of the victims, feeling helpless, did everything possible to find the criminal. Megan and Cherish relatives even offered a reward for any information that would help find the killer, but this did not significantly motivate the public to share anything. Both schoolgirls were buried on March 30th. The fathers, who were businessmen, even began to speculate that some ill-wishers or competitors could have harmed their children. It was troubling that 2 girls from different families had been killed simultaneously. At least one of them would likely have had nothing to do with the attack. Several weeks passed, and all of the obvious leads for the police turned out to be dead ends. The authorities had neither a motive nor evidence nor a murder weapon. The only lead they hadn't fully checked yet was the blue Plymouth Volare car in which an unknown person had left the beach during the time frame of the attack. They began checking all the owners of such cars in the area. Detectives even encountered a hardened criminal who had recently been released from prison. The man had 13 arrests on his record and, despite being only 28 years old, lived across the street from Cherish and owned a similar vehicle. However, this lead also did not lead to anything. They even attempted to search for smugglers who might have been operating on that secluded beach, perhaps delivering a large shipment of illegal substances, and when confronted by random witnesses, they decided to eliminate them. On May 15, 1992, at about 10 a.m., a call came into the Franklin County Sheriff's Office. On the other end of the line was a frightened woman who stated that the girls had been killed by her ex-partner. This statement was treated with skepticism, as officials believed she was seeking her moment of fame or revenge. However, according to her, her ex had confessed to the massacre. She was not afraid to give her name and was willing to meet with detectives. The caller insisted that the man had just called her and that she could not stay in the country. The killer was identified as Robert Neal. It turned out that this man had already been on the list of suspects in the early stages of the investigation but had been cleared due to his status as a former police officer. When the woman named the model of the new suspect's vehicle, it turned out to be very similar to a Plymouth Volare. She also stated that he had left town after these events and did not know exactly where he had gone. The witness indicated the last address where he had lived with his mother, which was about an hour's drive from Alligator Point. She learned that her boyfriend had a gun, but she did not know the caliber of the weapon. After seeing Robert's picture, the bartender realized he was the man who tried to pay for the offered cocktail. All this information seemed interesting, and neighboring states began to distribute the description of the man who was wanted. At one time, he had been a police officer in Portland, Oregon, where he had worked for many years. Thanks to access to the suspect's personal file, investigators received new information on the address where Robert lived with his mother, but he was not found. In addition, she had died shortly before these events, preventing further investigation. Robert changed schools 7 times due to moves related to his father's military career. After graduating from school, he went to university and even took up religion, ultimately becoming a Mormon missionary who worked in Guatemala before returning to the United States. He received a law degree and then became a police officer. Until his retirement, he had no problems with the law, no disciplinary actions, and a perfect service record. However, he also had a dark side. His ex-wife reported that he was addicted to illegal substances, which led to their breakup. Over time, Robert's life deteriorated. He changed many jobs and, by 1992, had gone bankrupt and was working as a cleaner in a local church. Detectives were frantically trying to figure out where to look for Robert, fearing that the only clue had already been missed. However, a few hours after speaking with his ex-wife, Robert himself called the Franklin County Police Station, introduced himself, and confessed to the double murder at Alligator Point. He stated he was calling from a phone booth on a New Mexico highway, having been traveling for 4 days from Florida. Information about him was immediately made public because even over the phone, it was clear he was in a depressed state. The police feared he might take his own life, and they tried to keep him on the line. Unfortunately, Robert did not call to surrender. Instead, he headed to the Grand Canyon, where he intended to take his own life. The police had little time left since the drive from where he was supposedly located to the Grand took about 6 hours. The investigation revealed that as early as 1987, Robert had started experiencing mental health issues. It seemed that 2 personalities lived inside him, resulting in a constant struggle between good and evil. Sometimes, the dark side took control, leading him into severe depression and thoughts of taking his own life. This situation required regular intake of a certain antidepressant. The next morning, on May 16, 1992, police stations received another call from New Mexico. A witness had found a blue car, inside of which sat a man with no signs of life. He was identified as 42-year-old Robert Neal Rodriguez. The car had Utah license plates that had been stolen less than a week earlier from a roadside motel parking lot. This allowed the criminal to carry out his plans without being captured by the police. On Robert's neck was a bottle containing some white powder, and in the glove compartment was a note stating that he of the car had been poisoned by cyanide. It emphasized that, under no circumstances, should anyone attempt to resuscitate him through mouth-to-mouth breathing, as this could endanger the lives of the rescuers. The note also indicated that he had sent a letter to one of the detectives conducting the investigation, detailing what had happened and confessing to the crime. The killer was found, and the immediate threat had passed. Robert's mother died on Easter Sunday, April 19, 1992, in a nursing home. Before that, his brother had died, and then his father. After the death of his mother, Robert had no living relatives, except for his half-sister. After that, he went to Tampa to see her to say goodbye. During this time, he called his ex from a payphone, complaining that he was running out of money and gas. He admitted that he didn't know why he had killed 2 girls. He said he was going to make sure he could never hurt anyone again but did not provide any details. After that, a frightened woman called the police station and told them everything. During searches of Robert's house, numerous books and records were found, all of which contained references to the topic of death. He had been struggling with psychological problems for a long time but couldn't control them. Megan and Cherish could not be the first victims of a sick person. By this time, his career growth had completely stalled, and the only source of income was cleaning the local church, which he did regularly. The local community knew Robert as a harmless, kind, caring person. People were amazed that such different personalities could coexist in his mind without revealing themselves for years. In his letter, he admitted that the loving atmosphere of the church probably contributed to him committing a lesser crime than he could have actually committed. 42-year-old Robert sent numerous letters before his death, the first of which was sent to a journalist. He claimed he was wanted for 3 murders in Florida. He admitted to killing Valerie Hunt, a student at Tallahassee Community College, who went missing during summer vacation after visiting a shopping mall in 1984. Valerie's body was found that same year in September. At that time, the case was sent to the cold case file due to a lack of information during the search for the student, as her body was badly decomposed. Forensic experts struggled to determine the cause of death. Valerie was described as a friendly girl, so her death was a real shock. It was probably his first crime, and he also could not explain it. On May 15th, a letter came for the same detective who was working on the Megan and Cherish case. Unlike the first letter, which was only 1 page, this one had 6 pages. However, there were no indications of other victims. Robert focused solely on 3 victims and provided the police with about 60 clues that needed to be checked. Later, Robert's relatives and ex-wives received letters of repentance, along with letters sent to the families of all 3 victims. The killer began the story by stating that these records should be regarded as evidence for the investigation and they should be transferred to the appropriate authorities. Apparently, these acts of aggression were not motivated by anything. He simply wanted to experience the feeling that comes with killing a defenseless person. This revelation sounded terrifying and sparked anger among the parents of the victims. Everything was sent out, and 11 letters from Robert were published, all carefully studied by detectives. Robert emphasized that after the crime in 1984, he somehow managed to convince himself that he was not involved in the death of Valerie Hunt. However, the pain he had managed to contain within himself all these years came flooding back with renewed vigor when he pulled the trigger again, killing Megan and Cherish. The families of the victims were left with nothing but anger, believing the killer deserved imprisonment. The investigative bodies carefully analyzed his letters and concluded that the case was closed due to the criminal's confession. Besides, all evidence, including samples of Robert's DNA, was collected, archived in case it needed to be analyzed and compared with other criminal episodes. There was still a possibility that there could have been many more victims of his crime. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Ben Rennick. Ben Rennick was born in August 1987 in Missouri. He grew up in a rural area with his family, including his older brother Sam, with whom he was very close. In 1989, the Rennick family moved to a picturesque farm. There, the 2 brothers enjoyed the outdoors, and it was during this time that Ben developed a passion for snakes. In September 1992, a tragic incident occurred for the Rennick family. While they were away, a gas leak caused an explosion that destroyed their beautiful home. As a result, the family was forced to move into a trailer. Later, Ben's mother, Kim, was diagnosed with terminal breast cancer. Despite the hardships they faced, the Rennick family remained united and supported each other through every challenge. After previous hardships, the family moved to a new house in 2002. Here, Ben was given a room to raise snakes. In 2009, after a long battle with cancer, Mrs. Kim passed away. Before she died, she asked her sons to promise to continue taking care of the farm and pass it on to the next generation. With an endless passion for snakes, Ben founded the company Rennick Reptiles, which quickly gained wide recognition. Thanks to this, he was able to export snakes to many countries around the world, from the UK to Japan. Snake breeding became his passion and purpose in life. He was known as an excellent breeder, dedicated to his work and more concerned with his love for snakes than profit. His reptile farm successfully bred and propagated many species of reptiles, from common species to some of the rarest in the world. The value of Ben's reptile collection was enormous. The snakes in his collection alone were estimated to be worth over $1 million. However, Ben felt lonely and wanted to have a family. In 2010, at a party, he met Lindley, and they quickly developed a relationship. Just a few weeks later, Ben introduced Lindley to his brother Sam and Sam's fiancé Eli. Both Eli and Lindley had children from previous relationships, which made it easy for them to connect and become friends. Lindley quickly integrated into the Rennick family and moved in with them. She helped Ben take care of the snake farm. They fell in love and lived like a real family, although they were not officially married. In March 2012, Lindley gave birth to a baby girl named Amelia. Ben was very happy to be a father. However, their happy family life once again encountered difficulties. Frank Rennick, Ben's father, faced serious business difficulties. Before that, he made several illegal stock trades to pay for Kim's medical and treatment expenses. The day before the FBI was scheduled to come to investigate the farm, Frank committed suicide. His death put an end to the investigation. Frank's sons once again faced the pain of losing a loved one. Ben inherited the house and farm, while Sam received a sum of money much larger than the value of the house. Although each had their own families, they lived together as one big family in their parents' house. Sam did not hesitate to use his inheritance to renovate the farm, demonstrating the bond and solidarity between the two brothers. Initially, the relationship between the two brothers was quite good. However, financial disagreements soon caused a rift. After their father passed away, Ben focused on his business and family. He decided to marry Lindley on April 14, 2014, officially making her a member of the Rennick family. Later, Lindley and Ben opened a new business together, Essentia Spa Incorporated. However, the business managed by Lindley encountered financial difficulties. Ben and Lindley often argued about financial issues. Although Lindley worked very hard, her income was still not enough to cover the salon's expenses. Meanwhile, Sam and his wife were also having financial difficulties. Ben allowed Sam and his wife to sell some of the furniture in their house to raise more money, but Lindley did not agree with this decision. This incident led to a conflict between the two families, causing serious damage to their relationship that could not be repaired. Ben decided to improve his family's finances by selling some rare reptiles at a high price. However, this plan failed due to a serious incident at the farm. On June 8, 2017, Lindley entered one of the warehouses and found Ben lying motionless in a pool of blood on the floor. Panicking, Lindley called her brother Sam and the emergency services for help. She reported that she had found her husband lying unconscious on the ground. During the conversation, Lindley dropped the phone and ran away. Sam continued the call and confirmed that his brother had passed away. He suspected that the cause of death could be a snake bite. The Montgomery County Sheriff was called to a snake farm for the first time in many years. Law enforcement officers were nervous about entering the farm, which housed more than 3,000 snakes. They were to examine a man lying in a pool of blood and were on guard against a possible attack by a venomous viper, which was initially believed to have caused the victim's death. When police investigator Dave Colbert arrived at the scene and examined it closely, he discovered a shell casing on a shelf at eye level. This discovery suggested that this was not a snake bite, as initially thought, but a more serious homicide. The shell casing was found near Ben's body, but no weapon was found. The killer had shot the victim multiple times in the back and head. Remarkably, no one in the family heard the gunshots or saw the attacker. Sam and Lindley were summoned to the sheriff's office for questioning. Lindley suspected Sam of being involved in her husband's death and provided a clear motive that Ben wanted to sell the house, but Sam was adamantly opposed. To clarify the matter, Sam was asked to take a lie detector test, which he successfully passed. The police released Lindley and Sam because there was not enough evidence to hold them. An investigation into the motive for Ben's murder was launched. Initially, the police suspected a robbery, but this theory was not confirmed, as all the rare snakes and valuables were still intact at the scene. Just a few days after Ben's death, the police questioned Lindley. They tested her hands and clothes for gunpowder, but the results were negative. After her husband's funeral, Lindley cut off contact with Sam and Eli. She sold her husband's company, inherited the house, and filed a $1 million life insurance claim on Ben. After receiving the insurance money, Lindley decided to sell the Rennick family home for $740,000. The Rennick family was told they would have to move. Sam began to suspect his brother's wife of being involved in Ben's death when he discovered that the insurance claim was settled quickly and the family business was sold shortly thereafter. Sam shared his suspicions with the investigating authorities. As a result, Lindley was brought in for further questioning. During the interrogation, Lindley admitted to having a complicated relationship with her husband, Ben. She also revealed that she occasionally met another man named Eric. However, Eric was ruled out as a suspect because he had an alibi. What was shocking was Lindley's confession that about 3 years after marrying Ben, she had been having affairs with at least 2 other men. Text messages between Ben and his wife showed that he suspected her of having an affair, causing tension in their relationship. On October 5, 2017, the Missouri Highway Patrol administered a lie detector test to Lindley, which she failed. However, due to a lack of concrete evidence in the case, she was released. Although progress has slowed, the investigation into Ben's death continues. A report of police reports shows, a month before Ben Rennick's death, Lindley made her first attempt to kill her husband. She fabricated a story about Ben being an abusive husband who regularly abused and beat her. Lindley told this story to a coworker at the spa, hoping to gain sympathy and support. Investigators discovered this after Ben died. Lindley Rennick and her accomplice conspired to kill Ben by mixing 15 Percocet pills into a protein shake. Ben drank the shake without realizing it, making him seriously ill for a while, but he eventually survived. Ben had no idea he had been poisoned. Investigators subsequently questioned Lindley 6 times about the incident. A surprising breakthrough in the investigation occurred on January 14, 2020, when a key piece of information was revealed from a state prison. A witness named Brandon Blackwell claimed to know about Ben's death. Brandon told Missouri State Highway Patrol investigators that Lindley was the one who shot Ben and that she had conspired with her ex-boyfriend. Brandon revealed that he and Lindley had been having an affair while she was still married to Ben. A year and a half after Ben's death, Brandon and Lindley had a child together. However, they broke up in 2019. Brandon claimed that Lindley had admitted to him that she had been having affairs, specifically with Ashley Shaw. a co-worker at the spa where she worked, and Michael Humphrey, another ex-boyfriend. Years after Ben's death, Lindley and her ex-lover Michael Humphrey were arrested in connection with Ben's death. However, after their arrests, both blamed each other. The question remains, who really killed Ben? According to Michael's testimony, on the day of the incident, he accompanied Lindley to the farm. Lindley asked Michael to pretend to be the buyer and wear gloves. Although initially assigned to shoot Ben, Michael failed to do so. In the end, Lindley took the gun and shot her husband to death. The investigation into Ben's death lasted 3 years. By January 16, 2020, authorities had issued arrest warrants for 3 suspects: Lindley, Michael Humphrey, and Ashley Shaw. Ashley was granted immunity in exchange for her cooperation in the case. She testified in court against her former employer. The former spa employee revealed that Lindley had been complaining about her husband and had convinced her to join in on the scheme. She told that Lindley claimed that Ben had been demeaning, insulting, and even physically abusive to Lindley. Fearing that she would lose custody of their children after the divorce, Lindley decided to get rid of her husband, Ben. She and Michael conspired to poison Ben with a lethal cocktail. When questioned, Lindley and Michael blamed each other for Ben's death. In October 2021, Michael Humphrey appeared in court in Ine County. His attorney hoped that revealing the murder weapon would reduce the charge to second-degree murder. Although Michael had the gun involved, no conclusive DNA evidence was found on it. To get his sentence reduced, Michael cooperated with prosecutors by revealing the location of the murder weapon. As a result, he was convicted of second-degree murder, a lesser charge. On January 3, 2021, no plea was entered, and Michael was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. Lindley's trial began on December 6, 2021. She was charged with fatally shooting her husband, Ben, on June 8, 2017, at his snake farm in New Florence. According to court records, the plan to kill Ben began at Lindley's spa. According to the statement, Lindley may have made up the story about domestic violence because she feared that Ben would learn of her financial difficulties and take away her children. The first time Lindley attempted to kill Ben, she tried to spike his protein shake with narcotics. The trial detailed the day of Ben's murder, replaying the entire sequence of events through cross-examination. On the day of the murder, Michael picked up Lindley at the spa. Ashley also used Lindley's phone to send text messages from inside the spa, creating false evidence of their location and misleading the investigation. According to court records, Michael intended to kill Ben but asked Lindley to do it. After the shooting, Michael tried to collect all the shell casings but missed some in his haste. He then returned to the spa and threw away Lindley's clothes after she showered, in an attempt to remove gunpowder residue from her body and clothes from the day of the murder. Defense attorney Catherine Barrer asked Lindley to share her personal and family history, her education, her relationship with her ex-boyfriend Michael, as well as her work history and the events that led to her marriage to Ben. The lawyer presented Lindley as a victim of domestic violence. However, no evidence of such violence was found, which weakened this defense. Michael was part of a group accused of planning to kill Ben. Lindley described her relationship with Michael as complex and codependent, involving Michael's drug dealing and her drug addiction. According to witness testimony, Lindley ended her relationship with Michael in late 2010, but they reconnected about a month before Ben's death. Lindley denied the prosecution's allegations of planning to kill Ben, including trying to poison him with a protein shake laced with an addictive substance. In court, Lindley admitted to having affairs with several men and expressed deep remorse. When considering divorce, she did not know who to turn to for advice. As her father was divorced and held strong views on divorce and adultery, Lindley wanted support when talking to Ben, so she contacted her ex-boyfriends, which led to her reconnecting with Michael. During the trial, Lindley admitted to participating in her husband's death and concealing Michael's involvement. She said the reasons were marital problems, including arguments, allegations of abuse by Ben, and stress related to his snake business. Fearful of Ben's reaction to the divorce, Lindley brought Michael to the farm on June 8, 2017. She claimed that her intention was to file for divorce, not to harm Ben. Lindley said that she took Ben's trash to throw away, then went into the nursery and saw Michael and Ben washing their hands. She did not hear their conversation because she was focused on thinking about how to talk to Ben about the divorce. Lindley recounted in a trembling voice how Michael pulled out a gun and shot her husband. She screamed and ran outside, hearing several more gunshots. Shocked and panicked, she only remembers staring at the trees as Michael ran up and pushed her toward the car. When she returned to the snake farm, Lindley discovered Ben's body. She called Ben's brother, Sam, and they checked to see if Ben was still alive by checking his pulse and breathing. Lindley expressed regret for not telling the police right away that she was there with Michael and for not telling them what happened. Due to suspicions of her involvement in her husband's death, the $1 million life insurance policy Ben had purchased long ago could be contested. Lindley has waived her right to the money. Ben became the beneficiary of a trust fund after his father's death. The assets belonged to Ben and his children, not Lindley. However, Lindley received the money she contributed to the trust fund, along with her daughter's scholarship. Lindley admitted to seeking support by sharing her story with her then-boyfriend, Brandon Blackwell. However, the relationship ended shortly after Lindley gave birth to Brandon's child. At trial, Lindley expressed regret for repeatedly lying. "I was just trying to avoid the truth of what happened," she said, and insisted she never wanted her husband to die. Following the final verdict, Lindley's defense team did not file a motion for a new trial. No appeals have been filed against her conviction. However, Lindley filed a defamation lawsuit against Blackwell, claiming that his statements about her involvement in her husband's death were false. However, prosecutor Kevin Zellner questioned Lindley's testimony during cross-examination. He asked why she did not check on her husband after hearing the gunshots, why she did not call 911, why she sent friendly text messages to her husband and Michael after the shooting, and why she continued to lie even after emergency responders were involved. Prosecutor Kevin portrayed Lindley as a clumsy but ruthless mastermind in the murder. Lindley admitted to suggesting that police consider Ben's brother, the victim, as a suspect. During the trial, Kevin criticized Lindley's coldness in accusing the deceased's brother. During the sentencing hearing for second-degree murder and armed criminal action, Lindley broke down and cried but still did not admit her guilt. On December 9, 2021, Lindley, 33, was convicted of second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 13 years in prison for the murder and an additional 3 years for the armed criminal action. In total, Judge Kevin Crane sentenced her to 16 years in prison the following January. Sam and Ben's family were furious about the sentence. They believe that both Michael and Lindley deserve life in prison, as they are as guilty as their co-defendants. Sam expressed deep disappointment and surprise when he realized that in Missouri, a human life is only valued at 13 years in prison. Ben was a promising young man. However, due to the actions of a woman, he and Sam fell into an awkward situation, causing irreparable damage to their relationship. Despite this, Ben continued to live a dignified life. He became famous for his talent in breeding snakes and even created a new species of snake named after him. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Nathan Pete. Nathan Pete was born on February 12, 1982 in Tamining, Guam. Nathan was not only lucky to be born in a wonderful land, but also grew up in a large and loving family. He has 3 brothers, Matthew, Anthony, Eric, and a sister, Carmela. All of his siblings are very friendly and always ready to help their parents in everything. Nathan stands out from the others because he never causes trouble. At home, he is a thoughtful son, and at school, he is a diligent student. His outgoing personality helps Nathan make friends easily. He was always the center of attention and his name was often mentioned. Nathan grew up near the ocean and loved swimming since he was a child. Later, he was also passionate about surfing. He often spent all his free time on the beach, enjoying the sunshine and coastal life. While studying at South High School in Santa Rita, Nathan met Michelle, who would later become his wife. He was attracted to her from the first time they met. They began to spend a lot of time together and their feelings grew deeper. They were always together, studying, preparing for schoolwork and helping with housework. Their strong teenage friendship gradually turned into sweet love. When Michelle was 16, her family suffered a great loss when her mother passed away. Michelle spends all her time helping her older sister Melissa, the oldest in the Michelle family, take on the role of mother and manager of the family. Nathan has always supported Michelle and helped take care of the younger siblings. In 2000, after graduating, Nathan proposed to Michelle and she accepted. Because they could not afford a wedding, with the consent of their families, they decided to move in together and start a new life. Nathan found a job as a receptionist at a local hotel. His income was enough to cover his living expenses. However, like many other young people, Nathan and Michelle had their own ambitions. They planned to have their own house and independent life. After getting married, Nathan and Michelle welcomed their first son, Dion. Nathan decided to join the Air Force to improve their family's life because his income was not sufficient. After graduating, Nathan was assigned to Elmendorf Air Force Base in Anchorage, Alaska. Although Michelle had to stay home to take care of the children, the family had a stable income. Gradually, their dream became a reality. They built their own house and had a second daughter, Miara. Nathan's success in the military motivated both of them to strive for things they had never achieved before. Finally, after 6 years of being engaged, Michelle and Nathan had a big wedding. Eric shared, "My mother was extremely proud that her youngest son was the first in the family to have a successful career." In 2006, Nathan was transferred to Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Arizona. There, he was promoted to the position of weapons loader for an A-10 Thunderbolt attack aircraft in one of the Essex squadrons. He also received additional training in logistics and material management. Nathan was passionate about his work and always tried his best. More importantly, he worked with the spirit of serving his country. One colleague described Nathan as a son of the country. In 2007, Nathan and his family moved to Nellis Air Force Base near Las Vegas, Nevada, to take up a new job. There, he was assigned as a junior officer in charge of the supply department, serving the maintenance of fighter aircraft. Along with the development of his career, Nathan's family also grew. Soon after, the Peets welcomed 2 more sons, Drawn and David. Michelle loved life in Las Vegas and considered it an ideal place to live. To please his wife, Nathan decided to find the most suitable house for their large family, a spacious and airy house. The family's dream house was located about 30 to 40 minutes away from the military base. Nathan used his savings to pay for the down payment. Now, the most important thing was to manage the family's income and expenses reasonably. He might need to save more in the future. At least until Pete had a new business opportunity. Initially, Michelle was excited about the unexpected gift from her husband and started planning for their new life. However, over time, the cost of living increased. They spent more than Nathan's income, and the joy of the new house gradually faded. Everyone knows that financial difficulties can destroy the relationships of many couples, and Nathan and Michelle were no exception. Realizing the difficult situation of the family, in mid-2009, Nathan volunteered to join the army when the United States was at war with Iraq. He was away for 6 months, and during this time, the family's financial situation improved significantly, which pleased Nathan. While Nathan was risking his life on the battlefield, Michelle was worried and scared about having to take care of 4 children alone. She was used to a stable life and could hardly imagine a different one. To dispel her worries, Michelle found a job at a telemarketing company for corporate credit cards. The job brought variety and new relationships to Michelle's life. She wanted financial independence and did not rule out the possibility of opening her own business in the future. Therefore, she actively developed herself by studying at beauty school. When Nathan was at home, everything went on as usual. However, when he was away, Michelle felt lonely. Having children and her husband's long business trips had cooled their relationship. Michelle longed for affection, so she had an affair with Michael Rudolph Rodriguez, a handsome colleague. However, Michael was a cunning and dishonest man. He had been imprisoned in 2007 for forgery and attempted theft. Michelle could not resist Michael, whom she jokingly called Sweet Rudy, behind his back. At the end of 2009, Nathan returned home. Although it seemed that the distance and challenges had improved the family relationship, in reality, they had not. Michelle was living a double life. She did not want to lose her husband but was still infatuated with Michael. So she tried to please Nathan in every way. Nathan was fascinated by the changes in Michelle's appearance and personality. During his absence, the children had grown up, and their studies were negatively affected. Therefore, he decided to stay with the family for a long time. Because of his pure and loyal nature, Nathan did not think that Michelle's surprising changes could be related to her infidelity. In Las Vegas, Nathan sought to earn extra income by working the night shift for a higher salary in tutoring baseball to children. However, Michelle could no longer hide her dissatisfaction. As their living conditions deteriorated, her attitude became more negative. Over time, their relationship deteriorated beyond repair. On Thanksgiving 2010, Eric and his wife Veronica visited Day. For the first time, Eric noticed a clear tension between Nathan and Michelle. They had changed significantly, and a previous affection seemed to have disappeared. They could not hide their personal and financial difficulties, which were evident in the nearly empty pantry and refrigerator. A week later, on December 1, 2010, Michelle and Michael exchanged suspicious text messages. At 11:12 p.m., Michael texted Michelle, "Hope you're feeling better. Plans for tomorrow are almost complete." 2 minutes later, he texted again, "If you're not feeling well, let me know. I can give you more time. I appreciate your help." At 11:19 p.m., Michelle replied, "My husband just woke me up. He was getting ready to go out, but I thought he would be late today. I'm sorry this plan has caused you trouble." In the months before the tragedy, Michelle had been conflicted about her relationship with Nathan. She did not want to be with him anymore, but she did not want a divorce because she was worried about the financial and emotional consequences. Michelle thought that Nathan would not support her after the breakup, and that the alimony might not be enough to sustain her. In addition, Michelle knew about Nathan's military insurance. If he died, she would receive about $65,000. These thoughts made Michelle feel guilty and uneasy. One day, she shared these thoughts with Michael and was surprised when he showed interest in the matter. Michelle's initial idea about his ex-lover evolved into a more elaborate plan. Michael realized that the plan was too complicated for him and Michelle to carry out alone, so he recruited his friend Corey Alexis Hawkins. Corey, 33, was a mercenary with a criminal record for theft and fraud. With a criminal nature, he agreed to help but demanded a large reward, estimated at $20,000. After careful consideration, Michelle and Michael agreed to this condition. Later, Their group was joined by 3 more people: Jessica Austin, 23, Corey's girlfriend, and her friends, Shannon. Shannon was promised 5% of the commission from Corey and Jessica for helping, and this large sum convinced her to join. The original plan was to shoot Nathan in his Chevrolet Tahoe, then drive the car containing the victim's body to an apartment complex parking lot. Jessica was responsible for purchasing essentials such as men's gloves, car covers, and perfume. Shannon would provide an alibi for Michael by confirming he was with her on the day of the murder, if necessary. On December 1, 2010, Michelle reported feeling unwell and came home early at 5:30 p.m., a departure from her usual routine due to her beauty school class finishing late. At around 10:40 p.m., Michelle arrived home, just 5 minutes before Nathan was due to leave for his night shift. Michelle found her husband asleep on the sofa. She woke him up and suggested they go upstairs together. He agreed. That was their last night together. Nathan was rushing downstairs because he was late for work. At the same time, Michelle and Michael were exchanging coded messages to avoid detection. Michael and his accomplice were sitting in a black Cadillac SRX, parked in front of the victim's house. They were wearing rubber gloves to avoid leaving any traces. Michael realizes that Nathan's military training could reduce the chances of his plan succeeding. So he decides to attack from behind. Michael pulls out a pistol and shoots Nathan 5 times in the back. Michael quickly drove out of the garage. At the same time, the criminals fled to a prepared location. There, they burned their clothes in the fireplace and destroyed the remaining evidence. Michael and Shannon then went to a hotel to create an alibi for themselves. Meanwhile, Jessica carefully cleaned up the apartment where they were staying. The police and emergency services were on the scene. They were shocked by the incident, as the Peak family's neighborhood was considered one of the safest and most exemplary. Detective Todd Williams began his investigation of the shooting scene by examining the garage. The garage door was unlocked. When he entered, he smelled a strong odor of iron. Blood was everywhere on the walls, in the car, and on the floor. Next to Nathan's uniform, the detective found his keys and wallet. Since the valuables were still intact, he ruled out the possibility of a robbery and murder. After examining the scene, Detective Laurie Anderson decided to interview his wife, Michelle. Michelle recounted the incident and revealed that the family was having financial difficulties. This information suggested several possibilities to the police. Nathan may have been hiding from his wife about his gambling addiction, debt, or infidelity. These theories could explain why Nathan was attacked. However, the available evidence suggested that Nathan may have been deliberately framed. Police checked his cell phone and found only photos of his wife and children, suggesting that Nathan was a good man. The investigation is ongoing. The next step is to investigate the surrounding neighborhood, as there are often witnesses or people who have heard something. As expected, several neighbors reported seeing a car parked near Nathan's house, driven by a man in a brown sweatshirt. The car left shortly after the gunshots were heard. This information gave detectives an important lead to continue their investigation. Nathan's family was shocked and they heard the news. They took the first flight out of Guam and were waiting for details. Nathan's mother, Carmelita Pete, cried the entire trip, unable to accept that her son had died so soon. When the family arrived at his house, Michelle hugged her mother-in-law and fainted. However, Nathan's mother sensed something was off about her daughter-in-law's reaction. She suspected that Michelle's fainting spell might be faked. Investigators decided to interview Michelle again. They asked her about the car that the witnesses had seen. Surprisingly, she revealed that her co-worker Michael Rodriguez also owned a similar car. Michelle's motive for sharing this information was still unclear. However, thanks to her information, the pieces of the case began to fit together. The police then concluded that either Michelle was lying or the perpetrator's plan was flawed. Investigators looked into Michael's background and discovered that he had a criminal record, which made them even more suspicious. When questioned, Michael remained calm and said that on the evening of Nathan's murder, around 9 p.m., he was shopping at the supermarket. There, he met a girl named Shannon. After chatting for a while, they decided to go to the hotel together at around 11 p.m. To verify Michael's story, the police contacted Shannon. She confirmed that the meeting was real. However, the detective felt that something was wrong, so he decided to check the information on Michelle's phone. Experts recovered text messages exchanged between Michelle and Michael over the past year. The content of their conversations was very suspicious. In particular, on the day Nathan was murdered, they discussed a contract with a man named Corey. This conversation seemed more like a form of encryption than a normal business negotiation. This made the detective suspect that this could be how the murder was planned. Investigators were almost certain that both Michelle and Michael were involved in the case, but due to a lack of conclusive evidence, they released Michael while the investigation continued. After examining Michelle's phone, they called her back for further questioning. Michelle appeared restless and seemed to be hiding something. Realizing that the police knew more than she had anticipated, she decided to reveal her affair with Michael. Michelle eventually confessed that a few months before her husband's death, she and Michael had planned to kill Nathan for insurance money. However, she claimed that she later regretted it and abandoned the idea. It appears that she changed her mind during the preparation of the crime. She felt guilty towards her husband and tried to interfere with the plan by turning off his alarm clock. Michelle believed that her accomplice would not wait or miss Nathan, but investigators did not trust her remorse. Her correspondence suggested otherwise. Furthermore, she sent Michael a smiley face emoji shortly after learning of her husband's death. Shannon later went to the police station to confess. She realized her predicament but attempted to downplay her role in the case. She explained that Michael had forced her to provide an alibi. Jessica had asked her for help, mentioning that her friends wanted to teach a big drug dealer a lesson. Shannon's job was to cover up the involvement of one of the attackers. According to her explanation, it was a way to seek justice. She added that Michael had disclosed the whole truth on the night of the attack. Shannon confirmed to the police that as soon as she realized she had been used, she went to report it. She also feared for her life, not knowing what they would do to her. Her testimony was confirmed by the hotel's security cameras. It was clear that Michael and Shannon arrived at the hotel at 11:40 p.m., not 11 p.m. as Michael had previously stated. Shannon's testimony led detectives to Corey and Jessica. But Corey denied any involvement in the crime. To honor the memory of young Sergeant Nathan, his family and friends held a memorial service on December 7, 2010, at the chapel at Nellis Base. Michelle decided not to attend the service, perhaps because she was not in the mood. Many of Nathan's teammates remembered his endurance and tenacity in the military. The squadron commander spoke of Nathan's outstanding achievements for his country and family. Everyone considered him a trusted teammate and noted his humility and dignity. Beside that, in a speech, Eric recalled, "My brother was always an example to the whole family. He loved life and was devoted to his wife and children. Everything Nathan did was for his country, his love, and his friends." On December 9th, Nathan's remains were returned to Guam. On December 15th, a requiem mass was held at St. Francis Church in Temining. Sergeant Nathan's funeral was solemnly conducted at the Pity City Cemetery on Guam. The funeral cortege consisted of 36 motorcycles. At the burial site, 6 officers carried the coffin draped with the American flag. Then, a 21-gun salute rang out. Nathan Pete was sent off as a hero. Michael Rodriguez, Corey Hawkins, and Jessica Austin were arrested without bail on December 8, 2010. Michelle Pete was also arrested the following day. Police were concerned about Michelle's mental state and placed her under surveillance to prevent her from committing suicide. On January 4, 2011, all four were arraigned in Clark County District Court. They were charged with conspiracy to commit murder, armed robbery, and murder with a firearm. Michael and Corey were also charged with possession of a firearm. The trial lasted 3 years. Several defendants denied any involvement in the case. With the support of strong legal teams, the defendants made several requests to exclude certain evidence from the case. However, the court denied all of these requests, and they were only able to delay the verdict by repeatedly postponing the trial. On September 21, 2015, the trial for the murder of Nathan Pete began. Michael Rudolph Rodriguez, the first suspect to stand trial, pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty. On September 29, 2015, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Michael's appeal was rejected. He showed no emotion upon hearing the verdict and displayed no remorse for his actions. A month later, Michelle Pete appeared in court in Las Vegas. She claimed that she had changed her mind about killing her husband. When allowed to speak, Michelle turned to the victim's parents with tears in her eyes, apologized, and said she loved Nathan and their children. She admitted she was confused and had made a big mistake, then fainted. However, the prosecutor did not believe that Michelle truly wanted to stop the plot to kill her husband. There was substantial evidence that Michelle was more involved in the case than she admitted. It was difficult to understand how a mother of 4 could commit such a heinous crime. The judge sided with the prosecution. Michelle pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder and first-degree murder with a firearm to avoid the death penalty. The victim's family also requested that the death penalty not be imposed. The judge described Michelle's actions as incomprehensible. In October 2015, the third defendant, Corey Alexis Hawkins, also pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty. He was sentenced to life in prison and his application for parole was denied. The judge found Corey had participated in the planning and had been present at the scene of the shooting. Jessica Austin also reached a plea deal with prosecutors and was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder. In March 2016, Michelle received her final sentence. She once again cited her emotional instability as the cause of her crime and asked Nathan's family for forgiveness. Carmelita Pete, Nathan's mother, was a very religious person, saw that her ex-daughter-in-law was truly remorseful and sorrowful for her actions. Carmelita believed Michelle needed forgiveness and therefore forgave her in court. She added that the most severe punishment Michelle had to endure was that her children did not want to see her anymore. They were afraid she would harm them like she had harmed their father. Eric Pete told Michelle that their family did not want revenge. It seemed that her mother-in-law's words had impacted her. The family would continue to live without her, and the children would grow up knowing their mother was a murderer. Eric's wife, Veronica, also wanted to speak. She expressed her hatred for Michelle and added that she had disgraced her family by pursuing greed and the love of a stranger. Michelle had destroyed her family. She killed the man she deeply loved, the man with whom she shared her life and built a future. Veronica asked if Michelle realized the consequences of her reckless ambition. It was hard to imagine. Such people always chase happiness without appreciating what they have. Nathan devoted his whole life to giving his all, unlike her. He often lacked sleep and took risks with his health and life. Thanks to that sacrifice, Nathan fulfilled his lover's dreams but never received recognition from her. The Pete children will carry lifelong psychological trauma. They will have difficulty building happy families and integrating into society. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Chris Coleman. Chris Coleman was born March 20, 1977. He is a former military. Chris Coleman met his future wife Sherry while he was serving in the Marine Corps, and she was in the United States Air Force. For Sherry, it was love at first sight. She immediately knew Chris was the man she wanted to spend the rest of her life with. Just a few months later, Sherry became pregnant with their first child, Garrett. Both devout Christians, Chris and Sherry decided to get married before Garrett was born. Chris called his father, Ronald Coleman, to tell him about the marriage and the upcoming baby. Although surprised, Ronald was delighted to learn that Sherry was pregnant. After Garrett was born, Chris and Sherry quickly had a second son, Gavin. Gavin had an energetic personality, while Garrett was calmer, like his father Chris. Both boys were happy and well-behaved. Sherry loved her sons dearly and was protective of them. Chris was a wonderful father, and they built a happy family. The family often laughed, played together, and cherished every moment with their sons. After leaving the military, the Coleman family moved to Waterloo, Illinois, a small town. They lived in an upscale neighborhood thanks to Chris's new job. He became the director of security for Joyce Meyer, a famous televangelist and CEO of one of the largest Christian evangelical ministries in the world. However, Joyce Meyer's multi-million-dollar income and lavish lifestyle caused controversy. Some critics claimed that she was a greedy con artist who preyed on the fears of her followers. They argued that her wealth and lavish lifestyle contradicted the religious teachings she preached. Chris was Joyce's personal bodyguard and protector. His main job was to monitor and prevent hate mail and threats sent to Joyce's church. These letters often threatened Joyce's life, with the sender claiming to find and harm her. Joyce's ministry, based in St. Louis, Missouri, hired Chris as a bodyguard. The job paid him $100,000 a year, providing financial stability for his family. In addition to his security duties, Chris often accompanied Joyce on international trips. He was always by her side to ensure her safety. However, this meant that Chris was away from home for long periods of time. According to Sherry, one year Chris worked for Joyce and was away for 260 days. This was stressful for her because her two sons, Garrett and Gavin, missed their father very much. The boys did not like it when their father was away and would mark the days on their calendars to count down the days until he returned. They kept looking at the calendar, eagerly awaiting the day he would return. When Chris returned home, he was away again shortly thereafter. Chris's frequent absences caused a lot of stress in his marriage to Sherry. Sherry was tired of doing everything by herself, playing both mother and father. She felt overwhelmed and underappreciated. This continued to have a negative impact on their relationship. In October 2008, Chris visited Tampa, Florida, where Sherry had attended high school. Before the trip, Sherry contacted her old friend Tara Lintz and asked her to look after Chris while he was in town. After arriving and settling in, Chris reached out to Tara. They decided to meet up, and Tara enthusiastically showed Chris around Tampa. At around 11 p.m. on November 14, 2008, Chris received a disturbing email. The email was sent from destroychris@gmail.com, and the subject and content were alarming. The letter demanded that Chris stop working for Joyce Meyer or he and his family would be killed. In the following days, several similar threatening emails were sent from the same address, repeating the threat and giving specific times when his family would be attacked. Notably, the sender of these emails seemed to know Chris's schedule, even his travel plans abroad. Chris informed Sherry of the threatening emails he had received and reported them to the local police the following Monday. He explained that he was often away from home due to his work with Joyce Meyer. The police offered to patrol the area while Chris was away. Despite the increased police patrols, Sherry remained concerned about her family's safety. She invited a friend to stay with her while Chris was away because she felt unsafe being home alone. Sherry emphasized that she was serious about protecting her family and would do whatever it took. To prove her seriousness, Sherry revealed to her friend that she had a gun. She even gave instructions on how to use the gun in case someone broke into the house while she was away. 2 months after the Coleman family began receiving the death threats, a mysterious letter appeared in their mailbox. The letter was delivered directly to them, with no identifying mark on the sender. The message was written in bold letters. The letter contains that, "Renounce your God in public, or there will be no more chances. Time is running out for you and your family." The threat was serious and clear. It showed that if the Coleman family did not comply, they would face dangerous consequences. Sherry was extremely frightened when she received this threatening message. The invasion of her private space and the direct threat to herself and her family made her feel extremely anxious throughout the following period. Sherry's fear increased, as the letter served as a warning of the danger lurking around. After receiving the death threat, Chris and Sherry Coleman decided to increase security measures to protect their family. In an effort to protect their family, Chris installed security cameras around the house. These cameras recorded continuously and streamed live to a monitor in the basement office. The footage was stored on a digital recorder, creating a permanent record. Chris hoped that this system would help him identify the person threatening his family. After Chris installed security cameras outside the house, the threats against the Coleman family stopped. Life for Chris, Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin gradually returned to normal. By April 2009, things had improved dramatically. Sherry told everyone that she felt her marriage was better and was determined to keep it that way. She expressed relief that the death threats had stopped and that she was happy with her life. Her hopes were quickly dashed when a new letter arrived at the Coleman home. This time, the content of the letter was more serious, warning that the worst was about to happen to her. Sherry's husband, Chris, was concerned about the contents of the letter. He decided to check the security camera footage from the night before. To his surprise, he spotted a suspicious figure in the footage, but could not identify the person. This new incident once again raised Sherry's fears and concerns about the safety of her and her children. She lived in constant fear of what might happen. The sense of security she had felt when the threats had subsided was gone. Now, Sherry felt as if her worst nightmare was about to come true. Local police stepped up their efforts to protect the Coleman family from the increasingly serious threats. Justin Barlow, a detective sergeant with the nearby Columbia City Police Department and a neighbor of the Coleman family, took a special interest in the case. Detective Justin took the initiative to call Chris Coleman. During the call, Justin said he had noticed that Chris was often away from home for work. The detective offered his assistance and provided his cell phone number so that Chris could contact him if he needed help or had any concerns. Detective Justin Barlow lived across the street from the Colemans and had installed a surveillance camera at their entrance. He assured Chris Coleman that he could respond faster than the police in an emergency because he lived nearby. For weeks, Justin's camera recorded the Colemans as they went about their daily routines, but failed to detect who had left the death threat. Despite Detective Justin's efforts to investigate, the videos provided no clues or information about the sender of the mysterious messages. On the morning of May 5, 2009, Chris arrived at the gym at 5:45. About an hour after leaving the gym, he called home to check on Sherry and her sons who were awake and ready for school. However, no one answered. Chris called his neighbor, Detective Justin Barlow. At 6:45 a.m. Detective Justin prepared the necessary items such as weapons, handcuffs, flashlights, and radios before going to the Coleman house. While waiting for backup from another unit, he decided to contact Sherry to check on the situation. With a mixture of anticipation and anxiety, Detective Justin approached the Coleman house and knocked loudly, hoping someone would answer. When he arrived, Detective Justin felt uneasy by the suspicious silence that pervaded the house. The lights were off and there was no sign of movement inside, which only added to his anxiety. A few minutes later, a police cruiser arrived to assist. One officer was assigned to check the back of the house, trying to look through the windows or back door for any sign of Sherry and the boys. They discovered signs of forced entry into the basement. This discovery made Detective Justin concerned for the safety of Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin, as there might be someone in danger inside the house. They decided to enter the Coleman home through the basement to investigate. When the officers announced their presence, no one answered. They conducted a thorough search of the basement and discovered a disconnected video cable at the computer desk. This led them to the conclusion that the security camera's video recorder had been removed. They left the basement and went up the stairs of the Coleman home. As they moved, they began to smell a strong odor of spray paint. The odor became stronger as they approached the main floor of the home. When they reached the upper floor, they found the walls spray painted with several offensive messages directed at Chris and Sherry's family. 13 minutes after the call ended, Chris returned home from the gym. Detective Justin asked Chris to stand outside while they searched the home. Chris complied, not asking questions or trying to get in, but just sitting quietly on the porch. Shortly thereafter, a third officer arrived. All three officers were aware of the urgent task of searching the remaining rooms of the house for Sherry and the boys. Upon reaching the second floor of the Coleman home, Detective Justin entered the bedroom of Garrett, the eldest son in the family. Initially, Garrett appeared to be sleeping. However, after a closer examination, the detective discovered that Garrett was dead. His body showed no signs of life and was cold. There were strangulation marks on Garrett's neck, indicating that he had been murdered. The detective was shocked to find Garrett's lifeless body. In the next room, another officer checked Gavin and was horrified to find that the boy was also dead. Both brothers had signs of strangulation. The killer also left an obscene message painted on the bed sheets, adding to the horror of the scene. Meanwhile, an officer entered the master bedroom and witnessed a horrifying scene. Sherry was lying motionless on the bed, dead like her sons. Her hair obscured her face. The police determined that Sherry had been murdered. When they examined the room, they found numerous bruises on Sherry's body. These injuries indicated that she had fought back, defended herself, and tried to protect her sons before she was killed. Detective Justin and the officers had just discovered the bodies of Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin. At that time, Chris was waiting outside, hoping to hear news about his family. Detective Justin was forced to inform Chris of the heartbreaking news that his entire family had been murdered. Hearing the news, Chris was completely devastated and extremely distressed by this unbearable news. Detective Justin took Chris aside to give him some privacy to process the information he had just received. As the situation took in, Chris had a very strong reaction. He felt nauseous and his body felt like it was collapsing. Chris curled up into a ball, unable to control his emotions. He was completely overwhelmed by the shock and could not believe that his family had been kidnapped in such a brutal way. In a moment of desperation, Chris tried his best to contact his father, Ronald. He called and informed him that something had happened to Sherry and the boys. As soon as he received the news, Ronald realized that Chris was in a state of shock. He could not believe that such a tragedy had happened to his family. News of the gruesome murders involving Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin quickly spread throughout the Waterloo, Illinois community where the Coleman family lived. When the neighbors woke up to hear the terrible news, they were all devastated and confused. The Coleman family was once considered a model American family, with two sons, Garrett and Gavin, who were cute and loved by everyone. A neighbor shared that everyone wished their children were like Garrett and Gavin because they were always polite and kind-hearted. Sherry's family could not accept the brutality of this murder. After discovering his wife and 2 sons murdered, Chris was taken to a nearby police station for questioning. Justin asked Chris to explain the case. Chris expressed deep remorse for leaving Sherry and the children home alone while he went to exercise. During an interview with Justin, Chris claimed that he did not know who might have killed his family. However, the detective noticed some suspicious points in Chris's behavior. Most notably, Chris did not ask about how his wife and sons were murdered. This lack of interest struck the detective as odd, especially given the severity of the case. It suggested that Chris may not really want to know the details of his family's deaths. During the interview, Justin noticed that Chris tried to hide the scratches on his arms. Despite the warmth of the room, Chris asked for a blanket to cover the wound. This alarmed Justin, as he knew that Chris's wife, Sherry, had put up a fight before she was murdered. When the detective asked about the source of the scratches, Chris explained that he had gotten the scratches while installing a satellite dish the day before. During his interview with detectives at the police station, Chris adamantly denied having an affair. However, he did admit to having a close friend, Tara Lintz, a Florida cocktail bartender and high school classmate of his wife's. Chris admitted that his wife would not approve of them talking to each other. However, he insisted that he had no intention of leaving his wife for Tara and said he would never betray his family like that. The investigation took a turn when a detective contacted Tara in Florida. Tara revealed that she and Chris were not just friends, but had been having an extramarital affair since November 2008. She provided police with her cell phone and laptop, which contained evidence such as emails, intimate photos, and videos that she and Chris exchanged during the relationship. When confronted with this information, Chris admitted that he saw Tara more often than he had initially told detectives. A detailed investigation revealed that Chris and Tara had a secret plan to meet at places where Chris worked for Joyce Meyer. They often chose exotic locations such as Hawaii to have private time away from their families. Chris argued that his relationship with Tara was not an affair, as he believed that an affair required a deeper commitment. However, detectives found important information on Tara's phone and computer. She had a calendar with her wedding date and planned vacations, suggesting that she believed Chris would leave his family for her. This evidence made detectives skeptical of Chris's testimony, as it contradicted his claim that their relationship was not serious. Chris's father, Ronald, was shocked to learn that his son was having an affair with Tara. However, he insisted that the relationship had nothing to do with the murder of Chris's wife and son. Ronald described Chris as a gentle, quiet person with no violent tendencies. He believed his son could not have committed such a serious crime. Although detectives believed that Chris' relationship with Tara could have been a motive for the murder, the initial investigation did not find enough evidence to charge him. As a result, after 6 hours of questioning, Chris was allowed to leave the police station without being charged. Tara was linked to the murders of Sherry, Garrett and Gavin Coleman, but was later ruled out as a suspect when police confirmed that she was in Florida at the time of the family's murder on May 5, 2009. The case led to the largest investigation in Illinois history. A task force of 25 detectives was established, working 20 hours a day for 15 days with the assistance of specialists. The main focus of the investigation was to trace the source of the threatening emails sent to Chris Coleman. Police scrutinized every threatening email Joyce Meyer Ministries had received over the past year, investigating across the country. All of the people who sent emails to the Joyce Meyer Ministry were tracked down and questioned, but none of them were linked to Coleman's murder. A team of computer experts was called in to investigate the Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin murders. Detectives sought their help in the hopes of finding digital evidence of the crimes. The team began by analyzing the diaris@gmail.com email account. During their investigation, they discovered that the email address had been created on November 14, 2008, just days before the first email was sent. A shocking discovery was that the death threats sent to Chris Coleman's family actually came from Chris's own IP address. Investigators continued to investigate by carefully analyzing the spray paint at the scene and Christopher Coleman's handwriting. They took photos of the spray paint and collected samples of Christopher Coleman's handwriting as evidence. These samples were sent to a handwriting expert. After comparing them, the expert concluded that the handwriting matched the spray paint. From there, investigators determined that Christopher Coleman was the person who wrote the words on the wall of his home on the day of the murder. Chemical analysis revealed that the spray paint at the crime scene was Rust-Oleum Candy Apple Red. A detective contacted the manager of the spray paint store after learning that Chris Coleman had made a purchase there a few days before his family was murdered. The manager confirmed that Chris had purchased the same Rust-Oleum Candy Apple Red spray paint. This finding was significant because it linked Chris Coleman to the paint used at the crime scene. The time of death played a key role in the investigation. Chris initially told police that he left home at 5:45 a.m. on May 5, 2009, the morning his family was murdered. However, an autopsy revealed that Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin were killed around 3 a.m. This indicated that Chris was still home when his family was murdered, contradicting his initial statement. 2 weeks after the bodies were discovered, Chris was arrested and charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. Prosecutors argued that Chris was motivated by greed, selfishness, and narcissism. It appeared that Chris wanted to start a new life, and his family became an obstacle. In April 2011, Chris was put on trial for the murders of his wife Sherry and sons Garrett and Gavin. Prosecutors told the jury that Chris killed his family because he wanted to be with his lover, Tara Lintz. However, he could not divorce Sherry because he feared losing his high-paying job at Joyce Meyer Ministries, an organization that did not accept divorces. During the trial, Chris's defense attorney argued that his client was innocent of the family murders. They alleged that an intruder entered the home and killed the family on May 5, 2009. However, 2 years after the murders of Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin, Chris was convicted of murder. The judge sentenced Chris to life in prison without parole, rather than the death penalty. This decision was made because the state of Illinois had abolished the death penalty, which was expected to take effect just months after the case. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Shauna Nelson. Heather is a girl with a cheerful, sweet, and innocent personality. Her beauty was characterized by white skin, rosy lips, and dark hair, which captivated Ignacio, who affectionately called her his Snow White. When Ignacio asked her out on their first date, Heather was overjoyed. She eagerly shared the news with her roommates. Heather's friends were particularly thrilled for her, as she hadn't had much dating experience before, and they thought this could be the start of something special. Heather and Ignacio's bond grew stronger. Ignacio consistently showed his care and thoughtfulness by surprising Heather with her favorite flowers and coffee. His considerate nature made Heather feel loved and appreciated. After Ignacio graduated from the University of Northern Colorado, he decided to propose to Heather. She happily accepted his proposal. However, Heather made one condition clear: if Ignacio ever cheated on her, she would end their marriage immediately, regardless of any apologies or attempts to make amends. She would not tolerate infidelity in their relationship. After making her stance clear, Heather and Ignacio decided to get married within a year of their engagement. Their wedding was a beautiful and joyful celebration. Ignacio began working as a law enforcement officer at the Greeley, Colorado Police Department, while Heather worked as a supervisor at the local credit union. She quickly gained the admiration and respect of her colleagues and customers alike. They appreciated her exceptional ability to comfort credit union members during difficult times. A coworker described Heather as wonderful all the way around, reflecting her kind and caring nature. After 5 years of marriage, Heather and Ignacio welcomed their beautiful firstborn daughter, Victoria. Heather's world was filled with joy as she became a mother. Ignacio also proved to be an outstanding father. From the outside, their life seemed perfect. A picture of happiness and contentment. Heather's life took a big change in 1997 when her father suddenly passed away from a heart attack. Just a few days later, her mother received a devastating cancer diagnosis. Despite the immense grief, Heather remained committed to caring for her mother, selflessly dedicating herself to supporting she over the next several years until she passing in 2003. During this challenging period, Heather's husband, Ignacio, played a supportive role, caring for their daughter, Victoria, and helping with household responsibilities. However, as time passed, he began to develop an interest in a new woman, Shauna Nelson, a dispatcher at the Greeley Police Department. Shauna was already married to Ken, a Weld County Sheriff's deputy, and they had 2 children. The couple's marriage, however, was struggling. Ken believed their relationship problems began when she returned to work after giving birth to their second child. Initially, the connection between she and Ignacio was friendly. But it soon evolved into a flirtatious exchange of comments and playful banter, marks the beginning of an extramarital affair. Shauna's compliments had a profound effect on Ignacio, captivating him and sparking a deep attraction. As they spent more time together, their initially friendly interactions developed into a deep love affair. Ignacio's feelings for Shauna continued to intensify, transforming from casual flirting to a passionate and intimate bond. Despite being married, they couldn't resist their strong attraction to each other. As Ignacio and Shauna's secret relationship became the subject of local gossip, Heather remained unaware of the affair. No one was willing to inform her, resulting in the relationship between Ignacio and Shauna growing stronger, while Heather remained in the dark. Shauna soon discovered she was pregnant and she shared the news with Ignacio, but his reaction surprised her. Instead of being overjoyed, Ignacio questioned the paternity of the baby, wondering if it was his or her husband Ken's child. Shauna told Ignacio that her husband had a vasectomy after their second child, so Ken cannot be the father of the child she is carrying in her belly. However, Ignacio, knowing that his wife Heather would be furious if she found out about Shauna's pregnancy, Ignacio became anxious. He didn't want the baby, and he desperately looked for a way out. Shauna agreed with Ignacio's plan, and he convinced her to have an abortion. He then drove her to the clinic for the procedure. Years passed, and Heather remained unaware of her husband's affair with Shauna. However, Shauna grew impatient and eventually decided to confront Heather. One day, Shauna and her friend Michelle Moore followed Heather to the grocery store, keeping a safe distance as they observed her. Heather, still unaware of their emergence, talked to a friend on the phone. Shauna eventually approached Heather and started yelling insults and accusations at her. Heather was deeply shaken after a disturbing encounter with Shauna at the grocery store. She recognized Shauna as her husband Ignacio's co-worker from the police department, whom she had met at several work Christmas parties. Heather asked Ignacio why Shauna, who had always been friendly to her, would suddenly lash out with hurtful words. Ignacio explained that Shauna had developed a crush on him, but assured Heather that she had nothing to worry about. Ignacio stepped in to address the issue, telling Shauna to leave Heather alone. He spoke to Shauna directly, but she became angry with him. However, Ignacio's intervention failed to stop Shauna's harassment, as she continued to bother Heather. Shauna once arrived unexpectedly at Heather and Ignacio's home, demanding to see Ignacio. Heather attempts to brush off the suspicion of an improper relationship between her husband and Shauna, his co-worker, but she can't shake the feeling that something is wrong. Unbeknownst to Heather, Shauna had confided in a colleague at the county dispatch center about her affair with Ignacio. Shauna claims to be deeply in love with Ignacio. saying she felt more strongly for him than for anyone else she had ever met. However, she also expressed her frustration that Heather stood in the way of their relationship. Shauna revealed to her supervisor that she would often visit the shooting range to manage her frustrations. While target shooting, Shauna would imagine that the targets were Heather. Meanwhile, Shauna's husband, Ken, remained unaware that his wife had been having an affair with Ignacio for years, until he discovered a diary detailing her relationship. Despite this, Ken chose to stay in the marriage for the sake of their children, rather than leaving Shauna after learning of her infidelity. Shauna was aware that she was not the only woman in Ignacio's life. He was having an affair with another woman, and this realization led Shauna to closely monitor his actions. Determined to be the only woman he was involved with, she threatened to tell Heather everything if he ever left her. As time passed, Shauna's fixation on Ignacio grew stronger. In an attempt to cement her place in his life, Shauna got a tattoo of his family name on her leg in July 2005. Her obsession, however, soon turned into an unhealthy fixation that led to her stalking him. Whenever Heather and Ignacio took their daughter, Victoria, out to a restaurant, Shauna and her family would coincidentally show up. Ignacio noticed the alarming shift in Shauna's behavior but chose to continue their illicit relationship despite his growing unease. When Shauna discovered she was pregnant with Ignacio's child for the second time, she immediately informed him she intended to keep the baby. Shauna gave birth to their son, Christian, in March 2006. However, due to Ignacio's wife being unaware of the situation, Ken proposed a solution. He would raise Christian as his own, provided Shauna remained his wife. Shauna agreed to the arrangement. In the summer of 2006, a woman approached Heather with unexpected news. Shauna Nelson had given birth to Ignacio's child. Heather was stunned and confused by this revelation. Upon returning home, Heather confronted her husband, Ignacio, about the child, seeking answers. Ignacio attempted to conceal his affair with Shauna, lying to his wife once again. Heather maintained her trust in Ignacio until one night in December 2006, when she woke up to find him gone. As she waited for his return, she became increasingly anxious. When Ignacio finally came back home, Heather confronted him immediately. Unlike his past responses, Ignacio chose to be honest this time. He confessed to spending the night with Shauna and revealed that the affair had been ongoing for years. He also shared that Shauna had been pregnant with his child twice and had recently given birth to their son. Following Ignacio's confession, Heather took the action she had previously threatened. She ended their relationship and asked him to leave the house. However, her deep-seated desire to keep her family together led her to reconsider and call Ignacio the next day. Despite her initial shock, anger, and skepticism, Heather's priority was keeping her family intact. She feared that ending the relationship would have a negative impact on their daughter Victoria, forcing her daughter to grow up in a household with divorced parents. Heather had a conversation with Ignacio about their feelings for each other. Heather lets him know that she still loves him, and she believes he does too. Heather wanted to save their marriage and made it clear that she did not plan to file for divorce. However, she also made it clear that she was not ready to immediately reconcile. Before considering reconciling, Heather presented Ignacio with several requirements. First, she asked him to take an STD test to ensure his health. Additionally, Heather also suggested that they attend counseling together to help them work through the difficulties of repairing the relationship and working through any issues that led to his affair. She asked Ignacio to relinquish his father rights to Shauna's baby, and she wanted him to end his relationship with Shauna altogether. Ignacio, determined to save his marriage, accepted all the conditions Heather set in order. He took responsibility for his wrongdoing and was willing to make things right. As part of the agreement, Ignacio called Shauna and ended their affair. Heather was present and listened to the entire conversation. Shortly after Ignacio hung up the phone, Heather received a text message on her cell phone. The message included a photo of Shauna and Ignacio's son, Christian, with the caption, "IGS Flesh and Blood," beneath it. Shauna was furious about the sudden end to her relationship with Ignacio, who chose to stay with Heather instead. Feeling betrayed and abandoned, her anger intensified. In response, Shauna began publicly talking about suing Ignacio for Christian's financial support in early 2007. Ignacio and Heather were working to repair their marriage after his infidelity. Despite their challenges, the couple was determined to move forward. However, Ignacio's former mistress, Shauna, continued to harass Heather, making reconciliation difficult. Shauna's behavior became more and more aggressive, prompting Ignacio and Heather to take action. To protect Heather's car from potential damage by Shauna, they started parking it in the garage. They also sought help from a lawyer, who sent Shauna a formal notice requiring her to stay away from Ignacio, Heather, and their daughter, Victoria. The notice clearly stated that Shauna was to stop harassing and intimidating the family but she ignored the warning. Instead, she persisted in sending Heather malicious messages via text, email, and voicemail to intimidate and provoke Heather. On January 23, 2007, at around 6 p.m., Heather was walking out of her workplace at the credit union. It was just after 6 p.m. As she walked out of the building with her co-workers into the dark parking lot, she was looking forward to a quiet night at home with her daughter. But her evening took a terrifying turn when a person dressed in black and wearing a Halloween mask approached the group, aiming a gun directly at Heather. The gunman appeared to be targeting Heather specifically, and as others in the group tried to seek cover, the gunman ordered Heather to kneel down and pointed the gun at her head. Right before pulling the trigger, the gunman expressed a personal vendetta, saying, "You ruined my life," and then shot Heather twice at close range. The gunshot wounds were fatal and inflicted in an execution-style manner. After shooting Heather, the gunman quickly escaped in a nearby red pickup truck. Meanwhile, Heather's co-workers and other witnesses immediately called 911 for help. Minutes later, paramedics arrived at the scene, but unfortunately, Heather did not make it. Due to the severity of the head injuries, Heather was pronounced dead at the scene. When police officers arrived at the crime scene, a parking lot, they were shocked to discover that the shooting victim was Heather, the wife of their co-worker Ignacio. Recognizing the victim, the officers immediately notified Ignacio and instructed him to go to the hospital. Upon arrival, Ignacio rushed through the hospital hallways to reach Heather's trauma room, but he was stopped by a doctor who delivered heart-wrenching news: Heather had passed away. The news was devastating for Ignacio, and he was now faced with the difficult task of informing their 9-year-old daughter, Victoria, about her mother's passing. As the investigation continued, witnesses at the crime scene shared their accounts of the events. One witness reported seeing the shooter suddenly appear and then flee in a red pickup truck, while another suggested that the shooter might have been a woman, based on their running style. Shauna Nelson has become the prime suspect in the investigation, linked to Heather's harassment. It was also mentioned that Shauna may have had a motive for the shooting, because she had an affair with Ignacio. The police officers at the crime scene were already familiar with Shauna and her husband, Ken, a police officer. What drew their attention was the fact that Ken owned a car similar to the one used by the shooter. As the evidence against Shauna grew, police sent out an alert to all units, focusing on Shauna and the red pickup truck she was driving. Ken was on duty that night and was driving patrol car when he received a radio alert about his wife and vehicle. He quickly began looking for his wife. 20 minutes later, he found her driving his vehicle close to their home. She explained that she had been out running errands, but he became suspicious when he noticed that she wasn't wearing shoes, which seemed unusual considering it was January in Colorado. It will be very cold. What further raised Ken's suspicions was that Shauna was wearing his clothing, including his socks, underwear, and pants. After stopping Shauna, he called for assistance and the police soon arrived to take her into custody. The authorities then launched an investigation to determine if Shauna had any involvement in Heather's murder. Investigators made several key proof in their investigation. They found a pair of shoes with Shauna's DNA near the crime scene, less than 1,000 feet away. In the parking lot where Heather was shot, they recovered 2 shell casings from a .40 caliber Glock Model 22, the same type of gun used by Ken for his job. This new evidence strengthened the case against Shauna. The investigation also turned up a Halloween mask hidden under the seat of Ken's red pickup truck. The mask closely resembled the one worn by the suspect in the shooting of Heather. At Shauna's home, investigators found a bathtub filled and ready for use, suggesting that Shauna may have planned to wash off any blood after the crime. After Shauna's arrest, her clothing and hands were tested for gunshot residue. The results were positive, showing that she had recently been around a gun. With this new evidence, Shauna was eventually charged with first-degree murder. Despite matching shell casings from the murder weapon, the actual gun used to kill Heather was never recovered. The reason for this was partly due to the actions of Ken, who stopped Shauna after the murder but failed to detain her. As a result, Ken was charged with destruction of evidence and abetting first-degree murder. During her police interrogation, Shauna provided an alibi for her whereabouts at the time of the murder. She explained that she had put on some of her husband's dirty clothes from the laundry basket, which is why she was wearing them. Shauna claimed she went to the store, realized she forgot her wallet, and then drove back home. However, when questioned about Heather's murder, Shauna denied any involvement or knowledge of the crime. Ignacio was also questioned by the police but was eventually cleared of suspicion in February 2008. Shauna's trial for the murder of Heather began, with Shauna pleading not guilty to the charges. The prosecution argued that Shauna's fixation with Ignacio, a married police officer, was the primary motivation behind her murder of Heather, and that this was not Shauna's first affair with a married officer. The state negotiated a deal with Michelle Moore, a key witness and Shauna's former best friend. Michelle often accompanied Shauna when she would intimidate and harass Heather. In exchange for a reduced sentence, Michelle agreed to testify against Shauna. During her testimony, Michelle made it clear how much Shauna disliked Heather and even confessed that she helped plan the murder. In contrast, Shauna took the stand in her own defense, strongly denying all allegations against her. Shauna specifically denied having conversations about her fantasies of killing Heather or picturing Heather in her mind during target practice with others. She also claimed to have had no involvement in the killing itself, stating she was on her way to a liquor store at the time of the shooting. As part of her defense, Shauna proposed an alternative explanation for Heather's murder. She suggested that Michelle might have killed Heather to make her happy. However, when Michelle was questioned further, she dismissed Shauna's claims. The prosecution alleged that Shauna dressed in her husband's clothes during the shooting to frame him for the crime. The state claimed that by killing Heather, Shauna and Ignacio would be able to start a new life together. After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Shauna guilty of first-degree murder. The judge addressed Shauna, stating that she deserved the sentence she received. Shauna's former friend, Michelle, was sentenced to 9 years in prison for her role in planning Heather's murder. Following Shauna's conviction, her husband Ken resigned from the police department, filed for divorce, and moved out of state with their children. However, he eventually returned to Colorado and expressed hope that their children would one day visit Shauna in prison. Despite the circumstances, Ken believed that Shauna was a caring and wonderful mother. Heather's family is relieved Shauna is in custody and they feel justice has been served. Her loved ones hope Shauna will spend the rest of her life reflecting on the suffering she caused Heather. Shauna's actions had dire consequences. She separated Heather from her loved ones. ultimately depriving the love, care, and nurturing that a mother would give to her daughter, Victoria. Unfortunately, when Victoria, 17 years old, she died in a car accident in 2015. Her vehicle crashed into a tree after she lost control, resulting in her untimely death. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Greg Mulvihill. Greg Mulvihill and Diana met on a dating website in 2005. Both living far from their families, they decided to move to San Diego together. Diana had been passionate about fitness since she was young, playing sports in high school and eventually becoming a triathlete as an adult. Their love of the outdoors and fitness brought them closer together. 2000s, Diana and Greg both were highly skilled professionals and achieved great success in their careers. Diana was considered extremely trustworthy by her peers. Diana and Greg first met in 2005, and 2 years later, they decided to get married, marking the beginning of their new life together. They chose Costa Rica for their honeymoon, where they had the opportunity to learn to surf. In the early days of their marriage, they made the most of their time together, experiencing many exciting adventures together. After their wedding, Diana and Greg moved to Carlsbad, a suburb north of San Diego. The area has a mix of lagoons, hiking trails, hills, and secluded spots. Diana was immediately drawn to the area. She enjoyed the quiet atmosphere and the beautiful scenery around her. 3 years after their wedding, Diana was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, a chronic condition that affects millions of people worldwide. Fibromyalgia is characterized by pain and tenderness throughout the body. While the exact cause of fibromyalgia is unknown, there are a number of factors that may contribute to the condition. To help her cope with her fibromyalgia, Greg took her on a relaxing vacation to Santa Cruz, California, in 2011. Greg was a caring husband who understood the impact fibromyalgia had on Diana's life. The condition caused constant muscle pain, fatigue, and limited her energy, making it difficult for her to maintain a job. Diana's ongoing health struggles eventually led her to give up her career. With more time at home, she longed to become a mother. Diana and Greg tried for years to have children. But Diana suffered multiple miscarriages. The loss of these pregnancies affected Diana, both physically and emotionally. Although Diana did not have children, she had 2 cats, Lanny and Turtle, whom she loved dearly. One day, Turtle became ill and passed away. To help Diana through this, Greg adopted a kitten for her, whom she named Taffy. Greg's gift helped Diana greatly. After years of trying to conceive without success, Diana was shocked to discover that she was pregnant. Greg was overjoyed and eager to become a father. Diana shared the same sentiment, feeling that her dream of becoming a mother was slowly coming true. In September 2012, Diana gave birth to a baby boy. After the baby was born, Greg took time off work to care for his newborn son. He was very happy and cherished every moment with his son. Diana, on the other hand, was worried about her son's health, wanting him to be happy and healthy. Over time, Diana began to suspect that her son might have a condition similar to her fibromyalgia. However, Greg believed that their son was healthy. Despite their differing opinions, Diana remained convinced that their son had the disease. Diana began extensive research and discovered guaifenesin, a drug commonly used to treat chest infections. Some believe that guaifenesin can help relieve the symptoms of fibromyalgia, leading Diana to consider giving her son a high dose of the drug. However, Greg was against giving his son the drug. The disagreements between Diana and Greg over how to care for their son added to the tension and pressure in their marriage. When Greg injured his shoulder and lost his job, tensions escalated. With her income reduced, Diana sought a sales position to supplement the family income. She also tried to generate income through online cooking videos, with Greg helping behind the camera, but the project failed. Diana then made promotional videos featuring cat litter, but these also failed to bring in the desired financial returns. When their son turned 2, the constant arguments and disagreements between Diana and Greg over their son's health issues continued to cause tension. They found themselves unable to find common ground. Diana confided in a coworker about her feelings of frustration and lack of support from Greg, revealing a deep rift between them. In July 2014, police questioned Greg about Diana's allegations of abuse. According to police, Diana filed several police reports regarding Greg's actions. As a result of these accusations, Greg was evicted from the home, while Diana and their son were allowed to stay. Diana confided in a friend about Greg's abuse, saying that the incident occurred while she was sleeping. According to Diana, her medication made her drowsy, and when she woke up, she found Greg touching her without her consent. Additionally, Diana accused Greg of sexually abusing their son. These allegations led to the involvement of Child Protective Services. Greg denied the allegations, believing that Diana fabricated the complaints because he disagreed with her about their son's health status. In response, Greg filed for divorce and sought custody of their son. The police searched for evidence to support claims of abuse against Greg and his son. Ultimately, a judge ordered both Greg and the boy to undergo psychiatric evaluations. After an investigation, the evaluations found no evidence of child abuse by Greg. Additionally, the police found no evidence that Greg had assaulted Diana. As a result, the charges against Greg were dropped and he was given custody of their son, a decision that upset Diana. In a subsequent settlement, Diana agreed to live in their home and compensate Greg for his share of the property. On September 1, 2016, the Carlsbad Police Department received a call from Jason Kovac, a close friend of Greg's. Jason reported that Greg had been shot multiple times and was losing a lot of blood. At the time Jason called 911, a Carlsbad police patrol officer was nearby. When they arrived, the officer found Jason and Greg on the side of the road. Jason explained to the officer that the shooting had occurred about a half-mile away from their current location. The officer quickly realized that waiting for an ambulance would put Greg's life in greater danger. In order to get Greg to the emergency room as soon as possible, the officer placed Greg in the back of his car and took him to the hospital. Meanwhile, just minutes later the officer had surrounded the area and began searching for the shooter. Despite their best efforts, they were unable to locate the shooter. At the hospital, doctors immediately rushed Greg into emergency surgery, where they discovered he had a gunshot wound to the chest. Greg survived the surgery, however. He was placed on life support and was expected to regain consciousness on his own. The police spoke to Jason about the incident. Jason, willing to share what he knew, explained that Greg had called the night of the incident. He told Jason that he had received a call from a private investigator who said to have important information for his upcoming divorce and custody battle with Diana. The anonymous inspector provided a specific time and place to meet. Initially unsure about the phone call, Greg's curiosity eventually won out. Greg then asked Jason to come to the agreed location with him. Concerned for Greg's safety, Jason agreed, and they prepared by bringing flashlights and baseball bats for protection. Greg and Jason arrived at the remote location indicated by the mysterious caller, but the darkness made it difficult to see. There were no street lights, making it extremely dark. The caller informed Greg that the package containing the documents would be attached to a large utility pole. Upon discovering the package, Greg approached the pole while holding a flashlight, slowly scanning the surrounding area with the light. Jason noticed that Greg's flashlight suddenly focused on something in the bushes. Greg immediately yelled, "Gun!" A gunshot rang out, causing Greg and Jason to quickly flee the scene. Bullets whizzed past their heads as they ran toward their car. When they reached the car, Jason realized that Greg had been shot. Jason quickly called 911, but was unable to provide a detailed description of the shooter to the police. However, he was able to lead them to the exact location of the shooting. During the investigation, police searched the area where the shooting occurred and focused on a utility pole, as the caller had told Greg to retrieve a package from that location. Near the pole, police discovered a neatly folded towel. Police found this suspicious and wondered if someone had intentionally left the towel behind to trick Greg into thinking it was a package he was supposed to retrieve. According to Jason's testimony, he reported hearing up to 6 gunshots at the scene, but police were unable to find any shell casings or weapons. The lack of forensic evidence led investigators to believe that the shooter may have had extensive experience and knowledge of weapons, allowing them to avoid leaving any evidence of the crime. As police searched the area where Greg was shot, they noticed a distinct smell of feces in the air. Further investigation revealed a pile of feces along with a towel nearby, which appeared to have been used to clean up after someone had defecated. Both the stool and towel samples were preserved and sent to the crime lab for forensic analysis in an attempt to find clues or potential evidence related to the shooting. However, the process of collecting DNA evidence is time-consuming, and it took up to a month to develop a DNA profile from the stool and towel samples. While waiting for the DNA results, the police continued their efforts to find the shooter. They examined all available evidence, followed up on potential leads, and thoroughly investigated several individuals. The police focused on Greg's estranged wife, Diana. The police asked Diana to come to the police station for questioning. They wanted to know if she knew of a private investigator who had worked with her husband, Greg, on matters related to their divorce. Diana claimed that she knew nothing about the detective and said that she no longer spoke to Greg. She also gave an alibi, saying she was home with her son at the time of the shooting. When questioned further, Diana said she could not think of anything else to add and could not identify anyone who might have been involved in the crime. Greg regained consciousness and began his recovery. As his health improved, the police interviewed him about the incident. They asked about his wife Diana and her possible involvement in the shooting. Greg admitted that he and Diana had a troubled history and were in the midst of a tense divorce and custody battle over their son. He suspected that Diana might have been involved in the shooting. Greg also said he had no enemies and did not know who might be behind the shooting. Early in the investigation, the police investigated the phone number that had called Greg. The number was on a pay-as-you-go plan, indicating that it did not belong to anyone. However, the police were successful in obtaining information from the cell phone carrier, which led them to a Best Buy near Carlsbad where the phone was purchased. The police immediately contacted the store manager to request information about the purchase, including the date of the transaction. They also requested any available video footage of the person who purchased the phone. After reviewing hours of video footage, the manager identified relevant footage that corresponded to the time of purchase of the phone. The footage was sent to the police for review. Although the video was grainy, the police were able to identify Diana, Greg's wife, in the footage. This new information made Diana the prime suspect in Greg's shooting. Diana was arrested, and during her arrest, Diana repeatedly maintained her innocence. The police then questioned Diana about her purchases at Best Buy. They discovered that she had purchased a cell phone, which then called Greg, leading to his shooting. However, Diana initially told the police that she had purchased a router. Faced with a surveillance camera image of the person who purchased the cell phone, who looked exactly like her, Diana admitted the truth. Following this revelation, Diana changed her story about her involvement in Greg's shooting. She said that her fear of Greg prompted her to buy a gun, which led her to practice at a local shooting range called Iron Sights. At Iron Sights, Diana claimed she met an instructor named Weldon McDavid, who taught her how to shoot. Weldon was a former Marine with expertise in firearms. Diana reportedly told Weldon about her difficult divorce and custody battle with Greg, which led to a close friendship between Diana and Weldon that eventually turned into love. Diana told police that she and Weldon had devised a plan. To carry out the plan, Weldon told Diana to buy a phone and use it to lure Greg to a remote location. Weldon's job was to intimidate Greg without using force. Diana admitted to driving Weldon to the location and picking him up. However, when she heard police sirens approaching in the distance, she asked about the situation. Weldon later revealed to her that he had shot Greg in self-defense because Greg had been aggressive toward him. She denied any involvement in the shooting and insisted that she had never asked Weldon to commit any acts of violence against her husband Greg. Diana was charged with attempted murder after admitting her role in the incident involving Greg. Fortunately, Greg quickly recovered from the gunshot wound to the chest and was released from hospital shortly afterwards. The police tracked down Weldon and brought him in for questioning. When the police asked about his relationship with Diana and his whereabouts on the night of the shooting, Weldon claimed he was at home, about 30 minutes from Carlsbad. The police then asked Weldon for a DNA sample, which made him visibly nervous as he realized they were getting closer to the truth. When asked if his DNA might have been present at the crime scene, Weldon feigned surprise and suddenly remembered something, saying it was a recent memory. Weldon told police that the night before the shooting, he had gone jogging due to stomach problems after eating Mexican food for dinner. He claimed to have stopped on a dirt road to use the restroom. Based on this information, police obtained a search warrant for Weldon's home. Their search turned up a rifle with a live bullet and 6 fired casings in the rafters. The 6 casings confirmed Jason Kack's account of hearing 6 gunshots. As a result, Weldon was arrested and charged with attempted murder and attempted murder. Police searched Diana's home with a warrant and examined her computer. They discovered a search history for the phrase, "new moon." Notably, the night Greg was shot, September 1st, coincided with a new moon, when the surrounding light was very dim. By carefully analyzing Diana's search history, police were able to conclude that she had prior knowledge of the shooting. Her interest in the new moon suggested that she intended to take advantage of the lack of ambient light to facilitate the murder of her husband. Further investigation revealed Diana's motive for killing Greg. As part of the divorce settlement, Diana was required to pay Greg $120,000 for their home. Faced with the possibility of not being able to make payments on time, Diana may have seen getting rid of Greg as a way to avoid paying the money. In October 2017, the trial of Diana Lovejoy and Weldon McDavid began. The jury returned a guilty verdict, convicting Diana and Weldon of conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. Upon hearing the verdict, Diana collapsed to the ground. Weldon was sentenced to 50 years in prison, while Diana received a sentence of 26 years in prison. Both defendants maintained their innocence despite the guilty verdict. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Adrienne Jones. Adrienne Jessica Jones lived in Mansfield in 1995. At the age of 16, she made a strong impression on the surrounding community with her beauty. Adrienne was known for her hard work in school and her passion for sports, becoming a role model for many. In 1995, Adrienne was a junior at Mansfield High School. From the moment she started studying there, she quickly became a beloved figure. Her friends and teachers admired her kindness, intelligence, and positive spirit. Adrienne was an excellent and ambitious student. She took advanced classes and spent a lot of time studying every day. Her efforts were rewarded with high grades. After graduating from high school, Adrienne planned to become a veterinarian. In addition to her studies, Adrienne is also a talented athlete. She was a member of the women's soccer team and showed impressive skills. However, after an injury, she switched to the women's cross-country team. This shows Adrienne's perseverance and adaptability in both her studies and her sports. The decision to join the cross-country team helped Adrienne maintain an active lifestyle and improve her fitness. She accepted this new challenge and worked hard to improve her fitness. With her determination and dedication, Adrienne quickly became an important member of the team. In addition to her studies and sports activities, Adrienne also worked 20 hours a week at the fast food restaurant Golden Fried Chicken. She loved the attention, especially from teenage boys in Mansfield. A close friend described her as a flirt. Adrienne spent about 2 hours a day carefully applying makeup, always wanting to look perfect. Adrienne was a normal, well-behaved teenager who still tested her parents' boundaries. She had 2 younger brothers and was well protected by her parents. Due to the high crime rate in Mansfield, her parents imposed a curfew after 9 p.m. on weekends to ensure her safety. When Adrienne wanted to go out, such as to an amusement park or the movies, she had to notify her parents and show them her ticket as proof. To prevent her from sneaking out, her father even nailed her bedroom window shut. Although it was not frequent, there were a few times when Adrienne sneaked out in the middle of the night to meet up with friends. On Sunday, December 3, 1995, Adrienne was allowed by her parents to stay up late to talk on the phone with her boyfriend, Tracy Smith. Tracy was away on a family trip for the weekend, but Adrienne was desperate to get in touch with him. While they were talking, another call came in. Adrienne's mother heard her daughter was calling Tracy. When her mother asked who was calling, Adrienne said it was David, her cross-country teammate. Adrienne said David seemed upset about something. The next morning, Adrienne's family woke up as usual to get ready for work. When Adrienne's alarm clock continued to ring in her room, her mother began to worry. She went to check on her and found that Adrienne was disappeared. Her bed was made as if no one had slept in it the night before. Adrienne's mother tried to stay calm when she realized that her 16-year-old daughter was missing. At first, she thought Adrienne might have gone for a morning jog, but she quickly dismissed the idea when she saw that her daughter's running shoes were still in her room. Although Adrienne sometimes snuck out in the middle of the night to meet friends, she had never stayed out all night like this. Concerned for their daughter's safety, Adrienne's parents called the police. However, they had no idea that miles away, a man had just made a horrifying discovery on his farm. At approximately 7 a.m., on Seton Road in Grand Prairie, Texas, about 10 miles from Mansfield, a man discovered something unusual while going to get his mail. He noticed that the gate to his home had been knocked down. Curious, he decided to check and witnessed a horrifying scene. At first, he thought it was the carcass of a dead animal on the road, but as he got closer, he realized it was something much more horrifying. A man discovered the body of a young woman and quickly called the police. When police arrived at the scene, they witnessed a horrifying scene. The young woman had been shot twice, with obvious wounds to her left cheek and forehead. It was clearly a targeted murder. In addition, police discovered the young woman with a severe head injury, along with numerous scratches and bruises on her arms and legs. These injuries may have been caused by her running over the barbed wire fence in front of the farm in a desperate attempt to escape. Police found the teen wearing pajamas, as if she was getting ready for bed before she was murdered. They suspected that the case may be gang-related or drug-related, given the execution-style nature of the murder. After finding the body, Grand Prairie Police quickly sent out a notification to agencies in the area. The notification included basic information about the victim, such as age, height, weight, and other identifying characteristics. The goal was to share information and increase awareness, in the hopes of finding a connection between the victim and missing persons cases reported to other agencies. Mansfield police quickly identified the teen murdered in Grand Prairie as Adrienne. They contacted Grand Prairie Police to coordinate the investigation. The next step was to break the sad news to Adrienne's family. Upon hearing the news of her daughter's murder, Adrienne's mother was devastated. Since Mansfield is a small town, news of Adrienne's death quickly spread to Mansfield High School, where she attended. Adrienne's classmates and friends were devastated by the news. Many theories were put forward about the cause of her death, the most common of which was drug use. Some people were also concerned about the possibility of a serial killer on the loose in the community. Her mother reported a phone call between Adrienne and her boyfriend Tracy, and another teenager named David had called at the same time. According to her mother, one of Adrienne's younger brothers heard the sound of a car engine outside the house sometime after midnight. When he looked out, he saw a pickup truck driving away. Police was trying to identify David, who had been in contact with Adrienne on the night of her murder. To gather more information, they approached Adrienne's cross-country coach. The coach said that there was a member of the team named David Graham. However, the coach was surprised to hear that David had called Adrienne, as there had been no previous indication that the two had a relationship. David Graham was a typical American teenager. At the age of 7, after seeing an air show, David decided to become an Air Force pilot and told his father about his dream. Since then, he has worked hard to make his dream come true. At Mansfield High School, David was a popular and well-liked student. He had a natural charm and was always cheerful. Although many girls were interested in him, it was Diane Michelle Zamora, a senior, who pursued David. Diane stood out from the crowd because she shared David's desire to join the military and was actively pursuing her goal. After Adrienne was murdered, the police interviewed David Graham. David admitted to knowing Adrienne since they were both on the cross-country team, but insisted that they were just casual friends. The police asked David if he had been in contact with Adrienne the night she was murdered. David denied it completely, saying that he had been home studying with his girlfriend Diane Zamora that night. The police thoroughly investigated David as a suspect in Adrienne's murder. They contacted Adrienne's friends to find out more information. One of Adrienne's closest friends said that she knew all of Adrienne's secrets, but had never heard Adrienne mention David. Furthermore, when the police checked Adrienne's phone contacts, they did not find David's phone number. This discovery further confirmed that David had nothing to do with Adrienne's murder. So the police eliminated David from the list of suspects. They turned their attention to Tracy Smith, Adrienne's boyfriend. However, the police quickly established that Tracy had a solid alibi. On the night of the murder, he was out of town with his family. In addition, Tracy voluntarily took and passed a lie detector test. This evidence further proved Tracy's innocence in the case. During his interview with the police, Tracy Smith provided important information about Adrienne's murder. He said that on the night of the murder, while talking to Adrienne on the phone, she had told him that someone named Brian had called. Based on this statement, the police investigated and identified Brian as a local teenager whose full name was Brian McMillan. The police believed that Brian might be involved in the case and needed to be further investigated. During the investigation, the police discovered important information about Brian McMillan. They learned that Brian had worked at a pharmacy near the restaurant where Adrienne worked. Brian had developed a crush on Adrienne and frequently visited the restaurant to peek at her. However, Adrienne felt uncomfortable with his constant presence. When the police interviewed Brian about Adrienne's murder, he initially denied any involvement with her. However, Brian later admitted that he knew Adrienne. The police questioned Brian about Adrienne's murder. Brian did not remember talking to Adrienne on the night of her murder. He admitted that he had been drinking that night because he was depressed and lonely. Brian also confessed that he had been at Adrienne's house on the night of the murder. At the end of the interview, the police wanted Brian to take a lie detector test, but Brian's father refused to do so for his son. A week after the police interview, Brian was arrested at home. The police thought carefully and decided to carry a weapon because they suspected Brian might have a gun. They wanted to ensure everyone's safety during the arrest. Brian was charged with Adrienne's murder. However, many of his friends spoke out in his support, describing him as a gentle person with no violent tendencies. This created a contradiction between the police's accusations and the comments of those who knew Brian. Brian's father confirmed that his son was home the night Adrienne was murdered. Brian was held in custody for 3 weeks, including Christmas and New Year's, pending further investigation and legal proceedings. During this time, the district attorney's office asked Brian to take a polygraph test, which he passed with flying colors. Due to the lack of evidence linking Brian to Adrienne's murder, the district attorney's office decided to release him. After 9 months of investigating Adrienne's murder, the Mansfield, Texas police made a major breakthrough. The information came from Annapolis, Maryland, where Diane was a student at the Naval Academy. According to reports from officers at the academy, Diane admitted to several classmates that she and her boyfriend David Graham had murdered a girl named Adrienne Jones while they were living in Mansfield, Texas. Police from Mansfield traveled to Annapolis, Maryland to question Diane shortly after receiving the information. During the interview, Diane denied all of her previous confessions. However, the Naval Academy decided to suspend her and send her home while the investigation was ongoing. After failing to get any information from Diane, the police traveled to Colorado Springs, Colorado, to interview David at the Air Force Academy. When questioned, David said he did not understand why Diane would make up the story about killing Adrienne. During the interview, David began to lose his temper and asked to write a statement. He wrote a 4.5-page confession letter detailing how he and his girlfriend Diane planned to kill Adrienne. In the letter, David recounted an incident that occurred in November 1995, when he offered to give Adrienne a ride home. On the way, they stopped in an elementary school parking lot and had sex. David felt extremely remorseful after cheating on his girlfriend Diane. He loved her very much and knew that his actions would hurt her deeply. One night, while the two were studying for the SATs together, they had an argument. Unable to bear the guilt any longer, David decided to confess. He sat down on a chair, sobbed, and admitted to Diane that he had been unfaithful. After David confessed to Diane that he had been unfaithful and had an affair with Adrienne, Diane felt extremely hurt and angry. David's betrayal had broken her heart. In a fit of rage, Diane argued and yelled at David. She even wished he were dead and felt deep hatred for Adrienne. Diane's emotions were so strong that it was difficult for her to understand and accept what had happened. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, David told Diane that he was willing to do anything to save their relationship. David revealed that he and Diane had decided that in order to save their love, they needed to kill someone. They chose Adrienne as their victim. In his confession letter, David recounted that on December 3rd, he called Adrienne and arranged to meet her secretly late at night. He told Adrienne not to tell anyone about the meeting. David had originally planned to meet Adrienne alone, kill her, and dump her body in a lake. However, at 2:30 a.m., David picked Adrienne up in his car, and Diane secretly accompanied him by hiding in the back seat. David drove to a remote location 10 miles from town. Here, he turned off the highway and onto a road called Satan Road. David stopped the car on the side of the road. Adrienne gently adjusted her sitting position, thinking that she and David were about to have a private moment. However, David had silently called Diane out of the trunk of the car. Diane appeared from behind, walked around the front of the car, and approached. As she approached, she came face to face with Adrienne, who was sitting in the passenger seat. Diane attacked Adrienne with a dumbbell from David's exercise equipment. Despite being badly injured, Adrienne escaped through the window of David's car. David and Diane panicked, so David grabbed a 9mm Makarov and chased Adrienne. Due to her head wound, Adrienne did not get far and collapsed in a nearby field. When David caught up, he shot Adrienne twice and returned to the car. After Adrienne died, the first words Diane and David said to each other were, "I love you." After David confessed to killing Adrienne, the police returned to question Diane. Surprisingly, Diane also gave her own confession. Both David and Diane were arrested and charged with premeditated murder. However, both later recanted their initial statements. David claimed that Diane was the real culprit, while Diane accused David of acting alone. In 1998, Diane's trial took place in February of that year. During the trial, several witnesses testified that Diane had shown no remorse for killing Adrienne. After deliberations, the jury returned a verdict on February 17, finding Diane guilty of premeditated murder. As a result of this verdict, Diane was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 40 years. In the same case, David Graham was also convicted of Adrienne's murder and received the same sentence, life in prison with the possibility of parole after 40 years. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Jennifer Dulos. Jennifer Dulos was born in 1968 in New York. Her father is Hillard Farber, a banker, and her mother is Gloria Tenenberg, a philanthropist. Jennifer has an older sister, Melissa Irene Farber. Jennifer graduated from Brown University in 1990 and later earned a master's degree in creative writing from New York University's Tisch School of the Arts. Jennifer is married to Fotis and they have 5 children together, all named after Greek Orthodox saints, 3 sons, Petros, Theodore, and Constantine, and 2 daughters, Christiane and Cleopatra. Jennifer and Fotis were married for 13 years before ending their marriage in 2017. After that, Jennifer began to feel afraid of her ex-husband. Which makes us wonder, who is Fotis and what changed him? Fotis Dulos was born on August 6, 1967, in Turkey. He grew up in Athens, Greece, and moved to the United States in 1986. He attended Brown University, graduating in 1989. Fotis then went on to earn a master's degree in finance from Columbia Business School. Fotis met his first wife, Hilary Vanessa Alama, at Brown University and married her in Athens in 2000. After their divorce in 2004, he moved to Connecticut and married Jennifer a month later, despite having known her since he was married to Hilary. They moved to Farmington and had 5 children. The marriage of Jennifer and Fotis began to crumble in 2012 and completely collapsed in 2017. Jennifer shared her marital struggles in a blog post in March 2012. She expressed her wish to be stronger to face conflicts without fear. In 2017, Jennifer decided to file for divorce. The reason was that Fotis had an affair with Michelle Troconis, a Venezuelan colleague. Jennifer also requested custody of the 5 children, but the court only granted joint custody. Jennifer feared for her safety and that of her children. She accused Fotis of unsafe behavior, bullying, intimidation, and excessive control. She recounted an incident with Fotis on June 3, 2017. When Fotis learned that she had made plans for the children on Saturday morning, he became angry and lost control. Jennifer said Fotis became angry and agitated, causing her to run upstairs to get away from him. However, Fotis chased her upstairs. Despite Jennifer locking and bolting the door, Fotis continued to verbally and physically abuse and threaten her, leaving her feeling trapped and helpless. Jennifer felt unsafe around her husband. When she decided to file for divorce, the situation became even more dangerous. In an interview, Jennifer shared that she was very afraid of Fotis. She realized that her desire for a divorce had deeply angered Fotis, and she feared that he might retaliate by causing her harm. Jennifer revealed that when she filed for divorce in May 2017, Fotis threatened to kidnap and harm their children if she did not accept his divorce terms. Fotis even purchased a gun that year. In 2018, Jennifer filed for emergency custody of the children. During the trial, the court found that Fotis had violated multiple court orders. Finally, Jennifer was awarded primary custody of the children. Fotis was only allowed supervised visits and phone calls were monitored. Jennifer and the children moved to a rented house in New Canaan, 70 miles from Fotis's home. Fotis was devastated by Jennifer's allegations. In an email to her in 2017, he expressed concern for the children's well-being. He realized that the children needed both parents, not just one. Fotis pleaded with Jennifer to reconsider their marriage for the sake of the children. He even suggested that they could live as partners and learn to accept each other. While denying Jennifer's allegations, Fotis counterclaimed that she had turned the children against him. He claimed that Jennifer called him a psychopath and told the children that he did not care about them. Fotis also claimed that Jennifer bragged about dragging out the divorce for 2 years so she could hire the mafia to break his legs. Fotis denied threatening to kidnap his child and explained that he bought the gun to protect his home. However, Fotis's argument not be credible given the events that followed. Jennifer was last seen at around 8:05 a.m. on May 24, 2019, after dropping her child off at school in New Canaan. She had 2 doctor's appointments in New York at 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. When Jennifer failed to show up for these appointments, which she never missed, her friends reported her missing to the police. Lauren Almeida, Jennifer's live-in nanny, also noticed something unusual. When she arrived at Jennifer's apartment at 11:30 a.m., she found the Range Rover in the garage, while Jennifer's Chevrolet Suburban was missing. However, Lauren did not notify the police until 7 p.m. Jennifer's prolonged and unusual absence, along with her failure to notify anyone of her departure, raised serious concerns for her safety. After receiving disturbing reports, the police investigated and searched Jennifer's New Canaan home. The results of the search shocked everyone who cared about Jennifer. They found blood stains in the garage, on the walls, on the doors, and on the outside of the Range Rover. Inside the home, there were scattered blood stains in the kitchen, and most notably, blood from both Jennifer and her husband, Fotis. This discovery raised suspicions that Fotis may have murdered his wife. The police investigation found that Fotis was present at Jennifer's home on the day she went missing. Police found bicycle tracks around the house, indicating that Fotis had arrived there on a bicycle. According to the police theory, Fotis stalked and waited for Jennifer to return from dropping off her children at school. He then brutally murdered her, cleaned up the scene, and destroyed the evidence. A neighbor's security camera recorded a Chevrolet Suburban leaving Jennifer's home at 10:25 a.m. Police believe Fotis was the driver of the vehicle. Police alleged that Fotis hid Jennifer's body along with items used to clean up the crime scene in his vehicle. He then abandoned the vehicle about 3 miles from the town of New Canaan. Based on these suspicious actions, police believe Fotis was the perpetrator of Jennifer's death and a ruthless killer. At around 7:30 p.m. that night, security cameras recorded Fotis and his girlfriend Michelle taking out the trash. Notably, they used up to 30 different garbage bags along Alfred Avenue in Hartford. When police searched the garbage bags, they found several suspicious items in the trash bags, including toiletries, bloody clothing, and used gloves. Blood on the clothing matched Jennifer, while Fotis' DNA was found on a glove and a garbage bag. These findings confirmed police's initial suspicions that Fotis was involved in Jennifer's disappearance. The case of Fotis murdering his wife was shocking, but what was even more shocking was the involvement of his girlfriend, Michelle Triconis. Michelle, a Venezuelan woman, had many roles in her life: mother, equestrian athlete, and former ESPN reporter in South America. However, no one expected her to become an accomplice in a murder. Michelle began a relationship with Fotis while he was still married to Jennifer, contributing to the breakdown of their marriage. After Jennifer went missing, the police questioned Michelle. When asked about her whereabouts on the day Jennifer disappeared, Michelle said she had lunch with Fotis and then went with him to one of Fotis' properties to clean up in preparation for a meeting with a client. However, the police suspected that this cleaning was actually to erase traces related to Jennifer's death. On the morning of May 24, 2019, Fotis stole a Toyota Tacoma truck from an employee and drove it to New Canaan, Connecticut. A school bus camera captured the truck traveling at high speed toward Wavani Park at 7:05 a.m. Jennifer's Chevrolet Suburban was later found in the park. Police found a bicycle tire in the trunk of the truck, supporting the theory that Fotis rode his bicycle approximately 3 miles from Wavani Park to Jennifer's New Canaan home. Police believe Fotis arrived at Jennifer's home before she left. When Jennifer arrived at the garage, Fotis attacked her. He then covered up the evidence. Fotis put Jennifer's body in her Chevrolet Suburban and drove to Wavani Park, where he transferred Jennifer's body to his truck. Despite Fotis's efforts to cover up his tracks, he left behind 2 key pieces of evidence at his new home in Canaan: his DNA on the doorknob and a mixture of his and Jennifer's blood on the kitchen faucet. Police believe Fotis spent hours cleaning the house. This was reinforced by neighbor surveillance footage that showed Jennifer's Chevrolet Suburban leaving the house around 11 p.m. Police were even more convinced of Fotis's guilt when he acted suspiciously 5 days after his wife's disappearance. Fotis drove away again in the truck without permission. This time, his destination confirmed police's suspicions. He drove straight to a local car wash and detail shop. Surveillance video captured a black SUV driven by Michelle following the truck. In the video, Fotis is seen stopping at a car wash, then getting into Michelle's SUV. Police suspect their intent was to remove evidence from the vehicle. However, this attempt failed when Jennifer's DNA was discovered by police on the passenger seat of the truck. Fotis became the prime suspect in Jennifer's disappearance due to the substantial evidence against him. On June 7, 2020, Fotis was arrested and charged with murder and kidnapping in connection with Jennifer's case. This was the first time he had been charged with these crimes, although the incident had occurred earlier. Fotis and Michelle were arrested on June 1, 2019, at a hotel in Anson, Connecticut. However, they were only charged with obstructing prosecution and tampering with evidence, not murder. This is because at the time, the police did not have enough evidence to charge them with the murder. While many may think that Fotis should have been arrested earlier on more serious charges, this only happened after the police gathered more evidence. Both Fotis and Michelle pleaded not guilty. Fotis hired attorney Norm Pattis to defend him. Norm was convinced that Jennifer was dead. Initially, Fotis and Michelle were released. However, in September 2019, they were arrested again on charges of tampering with evidence and obstructing justice. In October 2019, Fotis appeared in court to contest the charges against him. The judge said he would carefully review the case, listening to arguments from both the prosecution and the defense. During this time, Jennifer and Fotis's 5 children lived with their grandmother. The children's grandmother was granted temporary custody by the court. In January 2020, Fotis was arrested and charged with murdering his ex-wife in a Waterloo courtroom. At the same time, his girlfriend, Michelle, was also arrested for attempted murder. After his arrest, Michelle distanced herself from Fotis. In an interview, she admitted that she had made a big mistake in trusting Fotis. Before the incident, Michelle reportedly moved out of Fotis' $5 million home in Farmington with her daughter. Kent Douglas Mawhinney, a former lawyer and friend of Fotis, was also arrested and charged with attempted murder. Police aggressively arrested him. They believe Kent helped Fotis and Michelle create an alibi for the morning of Jennifer's disappearance. During the same period, Kent also faced charges of rape against his wife. He was divorced from his wife, and the situation became even more tense after he was arrested in connection with Jennifer's case. Kent's wife felt her life was in serious danger. Kent's wife reported to the South Windsor Police Department that her husband was plotting to kill her with the help of Fotis. During the investigation, police discovered that Kent was a member of the East Granby Gun Club, a local hunting group. Police were notified that a human grave had been found on land associated with the club. After searching the property, police made a suspicious discovery: a shallow grave on the secluded property. Police found 2 bags of lime and a blue tarp in the grave, but no body. They suspect that someone had dug up the grave. Although the suspects have been arrested, Jennifer's body has not been found. Her family is devastated. Although justice is imminent for their daughter, they acknowledge that arresting Jennifer's killer will not bring her back, so the family's grief will never be completely gone. Fotis was set on $6 million bail on January 8, 2020. He was released the following day, but is due back in court on February 8, 2020. Michelle was also released on bail. Kent was initially set on $2 million bail, but it was later reduced to more than $200,000. He was released on bail on October 19, 2020. After Fotis's heinous acts began to be discovered, he became extremely fearful. On January 28, 2020, Fotis failed to appear at an emergency hearing, prompting the judge to issue a warrant for his arrest. When police arrived at Fotis's Farmington home to serve the warrant, they found him unconscious in his car. Unable to face the consequences of his actions, Fotis attempted suicide by inhaling carbon monoxide. He connected the SUV's exhaust pipe to a vacuum cleaner and placed it inside his car. Police performed CPR and restored his weak heartbeat. He was then taken by ambulance to Yukon Medical Center, then transferred to Jacob Medical Center in the Bronx for hyperbaric oxygen therapy. While in the hospital, Fotis' children, who were living with their grandmother, visited him for the first time since he was charged with Jennifer's murder. Police found a suicide note in Fotis's car. In it, he wrote that he could not bear to spend even 1 hour in jail for a crime he knew nothing about. On January 30, 2020, Jacobs Medical Center confirmed Fotis' death. Police later released a report that included information from Anna Curry, Fotis' last girlfriend. Anna said she was with Fotis on the day of the emergency hearing. According to Anna, she and Fotis planned to drive to court together, but finally Fotis suggested they go separately. Anna admitted that she was panicked and she received a call from Fotis's lawyer asking about Fotis's absence from court. Anna was driving at the time and responded that Fotis was supposed to be there. The attorney said the GPS device showed that Fotis was still at his home in Farmington. Anna immediately realized that Fotis might have harmed himself and asked the attorney to call 911. After Fotis' death, the murder charges against him were dismissed on March 3, 2020. The judge ordered the prosecutor to apply null proska, abandonment of prosecution. This does not mean that Fotis is acquitted, but simply that the case cannot proceed due to his death. Abandonment of prosecution acknowledges this fact, but gives the prosecutor 1 year to reopen the case if he wishes. Otherwise, the case will be dismissed permanently. During the hearing, Fotis' attorney Norm Pattis wanted to clear his client's name. He claimed that Fotis was framed and argued that the framer had dumped bloody clothes and incriminating evidence in front of Fotis's house. Norm explained that if Fotis was the perpetrator, he would not have accidentally dumped these items, leading to the police discovering them on surveillance cameras. Norm asked for the Fotis estate to be substituted as a defendant, but the request was not considered. Michelle is under house arrest after being charged with conspiracy to murder Jennifer. Michelle's attorney, John Sean, admitted in an interview that his client's case has not progressed. Michelle was scheduled to appear in court on August 6, 2020, while Kent Douglas Mawhinney was scheduled to appear in court on June 2, 2020. Both have pleaded not guilty to the charges. In an interview, Michelle responded to those who judge her without knowing her well. She admitted that she can be wrong about others, but she cannot say whether Fotis killed his wife. However, she believes that believing Fotis was a waste of time, and this has been proven true. For years after Jennifer went missing, she has still not been found. Police searched for her body in several locations over the years. In 2019, they began searching Wavani Park, 3 miles from New Canaan. They used dogs and a helicopter to thoroughly search the area. The search for Jennifer expanded beyond the initial area, including New York City, where the family owned property. After a thorough search there, police turned their attention to central Connecticut. In Hartford, police discovered surveillance footage showing Fotis dumping trash bags in various dumpsters around the city. This led to a weeks-long search of the waste treatment plant, where police found key evidence. The search continued at a fishing pond in Avon that the Dullos family frequented. Police also searched properties owned by Jennifer's husband's company in central Connecticut, with an estimated 3,000 acres searched. However, despite extensive search efforts, Jennifer has not been found. In August 2021, the investigation led police to a Farmington home on Mountain Spring Road that was associated with Jennifer's husband. Police decided to search the home to follow up on previous leads. They invited Bob Perry, a well-known expert in finding unmarked graves, to join the search. Police also brought in septic tank pumping equipment and an excavator to increase the effectiveness of the search. However, to date, police have not released any information about the discovery of Jennifer's body. Although the tragedy of Jennifer was heartbreaking, it did lead to a positive outcome. In May 2021, the Connecticut Senate passed a landmark domestic violence bill. The bill was named after Jennifer and Jennifer Magnano, 2 victims of domestic violence. The bill received near-unanimous support from members of the Senate. Governor Ned Lamont signed the bill into law on June 28, 2021. Jennifer's family is still deeply saddened by her passing. In a recent interview, a family spokesperson expressed their deep sorrow for Jennifer. He emphasized that her wonderful personality and optimistic spirit left a deep impression, causing even those who never met Jennifer to feel heartbroken by her disappearance.